I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Becca, can you take rolls, please?
Okay, Director Cicada?
Oh, my name?
Yeah.
We were chatting. I'm here.
Okay, Director Thomas?
I'm here.
Director Underhill?
Here.
President Radaman?
Here.
And Director Davidson is absent today.
Okay, item 2 on our agenda is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on any non-agendized items. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. No action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. And just as a reminder for everyone online and everyone in the room, the rate study, the cost of business study is on the agenda today under item 4. With that said, any public comment on any non-agendized items?
Yeah.
Please state your name and.
Hi, my name is Francisco de la Cruz. I'm a Valley Springs resident, and I'd like to ask a couple of things. The first thing is I'd like to thank one of the board members for being an active supporter of the recent petition drive to gather signatures for putting a ballot measure to help our firefighters. And I'm later going to come back to you as a board to ask you to endorse the measure once it gets approved for voting on the March 2024 election. We're going to be asking that of all public boards. So I would ask that during some of your interaction sessions that you consider that potentially we're going to be coming asking you formally to endorse and support the measure to add a 1% sales tax to the tax rolls. I have a question for you in terms of how you choose to go about looking at whether or not the rate structure we're going to talk about later makes any sense. Are you all familiar with a website called Data USA, which basically provides, oh, you can't answer.
Yeah.
I would ask that all of you become familiar with a website called Data USA. It gets down to the granular level, at the county level, at the city level, et cetera. And it talks about what kinds of jobs are there, how many are there managerial jobs, what percentage of them are government jobs, civil jobs, medical professional, et cetera, so that you understand what kind of load we're asking people to carry here in Calaveras County. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that would be nice. Thank you, sir. Any further public comment? Okay. We'll get to each agenda item. There will be public comment on every agenda item. Yeah. Okay, item number 3 on our agenda is our consent agenda. We got the 3A, that review board of directors monthly timesheets. 3B, ratify claim summary. 3C, approval of the annual resolution to place delinquent charges on the county tax rolls. And 3D, receive and file the governance planning letter from our auditor.
I'll make a motion.
I'd like to pull
Oh, go ahead.
the claim summary, 3B.
Okay, we're pulling 3B. We need a,
I'll make a motion to approve 3A, 3C, and 3D.
Second.
we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, Bertha.
Okay.
Move on to 3B.
Yes, on page number 3, we have the power district wide, and the amount is 190,558 and 61 cents. And I just want to clarify that the rate from CPPA is an increase.
Actually, the rate has not increased in this claim summary. So the CPPA rate has doubled over the last 2 years. We were expecting another 10% increase from CPPA. That's what all special districts, public agencies had received that letter from CPPA a few months ago. And because we were expecting that rate to have to go up again in July. CPPA board met earlier this month, or I guess it was last month, and had surprisingly good news that the rate, the PG&E portion of the rate, which has been driving the CPPA rate increase over the last couple of years, actually did not increase as much as we expected it to. So the CPPA rate did not go up again this month, which is great news. It still represents a huge increase over the last couple of years, but it didn't go up again.
How's that going to affect our budget going forward? Do you not expect it to go up at all, or?
So last year, we don't know for sure, because we have over the last couple of years, we've had instances where the CPPA board had to meet and increase the rate mid fiscal year. I think the last time it was done was January. And so we had budgeted for that 10% increase. So we hope that that will be a cost savings for us in this fiscal year, but we're not sure yet. You have to wait and see how the rest of the year plays out.
The 10%, what was that annually? Do you remember? Million, what was it?
So yeah, for us, it's a little bit shy of $200,000. So our current CPPA power bill over the course of the year is about $2 million.
Yeah.
And the 10% of that, you said it was only a $200,000 increase?
Right.
Okay.
And we need to always keep in mind that, everybody understands that PG&E is not our main supplier of power. It is CPPA.
Right, so
Yeah.
PG&E delivers the power, and so we are still impacted by when they have, what they've done recently, they've increased their distribution charge. And so we still have to pay the distribution charge to PG&E since they have the poles and wires that deliver the power. But that's right, the source of power is New Melones and CPPA.
Right.
And we're still getting a significantly cheaper rate than PG&E's commercial customers. But it's gone up a lot.
Okay. Page number 4, we have a charge for IB Consulting for the rate study, and we are still coming on with $9,480. And am I assuming that this is the end of the rate study
No
charges?
There'll be more, and as we go through this process, both because Habib will be here next week for our community meetings, and he will be here for the public hearing. And so we're not at the end of that contract yet.
Okay, so that's IB Consulting.
Right.
Okay. I had one more question on page number 4, and that was the first entry that was for Gamby disposal and biosolids removal for June of 23.
Yeah,
How long has our contract been with Gamby, or how much longer will it be, or are they perennial?
good question. I'm not sure. I think we've used them for quite a while. I'm not sure there's an alternative.
Correct. Yeah, we've used Gamby for many years to haul the biosolids. Excuse me, and there's no change in sight until we can change how we address them in general, really.
And we're always looking at that on
Absolutely,
removal of
absolutely.
biosolid.
Yep.
And so it's like PG&E, or it's like
Yeah, it's like a routine operational cost associated with the wastewater treatment process. Yes.
okay.
Anything
Thank
further?
you. No, that's it.
Okay. All right, back to the consent agenda. Thank you, Damon.
Yeah.
Item 3B, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone
We have to-
opposed?
We have to have a motion.
Oh,
We have to have a
okay,
motion. You want,
we need a motion for 3B. And
So
before we
moved.
make the motion, any public comment on this item? Because we pulled it, it is available for public comment. Seeing none?
I'd just like to point out that we're usual and customary for us to see expenditures that are 2 million, 2 million 4, like the previous month. This is substantially higher. But if you look at the detail, there's a tremendous amount of payments to contractors and subcontractors for the work in improving our facilities that we've contracted, and the work has been done, and we're paying the bills now. So Emerson had a big paycheck,
nice.
which they're a valued contractor.
Yeah, and you're right. A lot of it is ongoing infrastructure projects. Part of it too is we wanted to make sure we're year-end fiscal year. So we want to make sure we get all of those bills paid. And since we're already starting to work with the auditor and the audit for 2023. And so that's why there was a big push to get that done in July. But a lot of it is driven by ongoing construction projects.
Okay.
So I'll make a second on Bertha's first for approving.
Yeah, we got a motion for 3B and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you. Thank you, Becca. And just to make an announcement for those of you online, there's a viewer named Peggy whose camera is on. And just so you know, your camera is live in our boardroom and available for everyone to see online. If you would like to shut it off, that's up to you. Thank you. I think she's saying, how do you shut it off? But next to the button, usually in the bottom left corner of your screen on Teams, there's a cross out for video and audio. Your audio already has a line through it. Next to it should be video. If you could touch that, your video will go off. There you go.
There. Nice. Thank you, Peggy.
Okay, item number 4 on our agenda, old business. Update discussion regarding the cost of service study for the proposed water and wastewater rates and the Proposition 218 public hearing. Says Jeff Myers, Director of Administrative Services, and there he is. Hello,
Yeah,
Jeff.
I'm going to kick it off a little. Sorry to
Okay.
jump in there and cut in front of Jeff. Couple of things of updates I wanted to give before we dive into the cost of service study. One is something I've talked to the board members about, and we've started pushing information out. We were getting some early feedback on the time of our public hearing for the rate adoption. That having it middle of the day made it hard for people to get here. And we are always trying to encourage public participation. So we went ahead and changed the time of the public hearing. It will still be September 13th here at the district, but we're going to do it at 5:30 instead of at 1 o'clock. And so we have sent a new notice, just a postcard size, not the big notice like we sent out with all of the information about the proposal. But just a new notice informing customers of the change in the time. We've already alerted the local media, website, all of our other outreach material to reflect that changed time. But we just want to make sure we address that loud and clear and frequently so that there's no confusion on that front. I can't say enough about our public relations team and the work that they put into making sure we have all of the information that has been requested of us, and we're still in the process, nearly complete though, with the presentation that we'll be delivering at the community meetings next week. I've frequently asked questions document that we're finalizing, that'll be up on the website as well. So there's just a lot of work going into public outreach, public education, because we have a story to tell here that we're hoping people will listen to and understand, with an open mind and understand before considering whether to protest the rate increase or not. Because really what is clear to us and what the story we're trying to tell in the presentation is just how much our costs have gone up compared to our revenue, and that without rate increases, we're running an operational deficit. We don't have enough money to keep doing what the district needs to do to support our communities. So we have a lot of detailed information on that that we'll be sharing, especially next week during those community meetings. We're really looking forward to that.
And let's clarify that is September the 13th at 5:30. right here.
September, that would be the public hearing.
That'll be-
Yeah,
Right here
that's the
will be
public
September
hearing.
13th
Mhm.
at 5:30 right here. And then we have 3 community workshops
Right.
next week in the evening, where we have a 4th event planned in West Point. Later this month, we'll be at the farmers market in West Point. We're going to do some pop-up events as well along the way to make sure people have an opportunity to receive information directly from us. There's a lot of misinformation out there, and so we want to try to provide accurate information wherever we can.
So again, that public hearing is moved from 1 to 5:30 on the September 13th here in this room. The next week in Ebbets Pass on Monday, the 14th is it 5:30?
5:30.
At 5:30. Will be on Wednesday, the 16th, will be in Copperopolis at 5:30. And then on Thursday, the 17th at 5:30, we'll be in Valley Springs at the Veterans Hall. And all those are on our website, and I'm sure they're all in our mailer, the 218 mailer that went out that every customer should have received. I see Kelly in the back of the room nodding that yes, all those addresses are there. And do we have a date for the West Point one?
August 27th, I believe it is, Thursday.
You haven't gotten back to me, but something like that, yeah.
Yeah. I
And
think
that'll be
that's
at
what we decided.
5:30 as well in West Point?
One in West Point's not gonna be real.
It's not a
Structured?
Yeah, it's not the same community workshop type, but we want to be present in the community and give.
So
people an
The
opportunity.
farmer's market starts at 4, so we'll probably have a table set up in the farmer's market instead of selling ag stuff, we're gonna be selling CCWD and give them an opportunity.
Okay. All right.
And
Michael, you're-
lastly, just to clarify too, because there was some discussion last week of possibly changing the date of the hearing, and that was at the time that the agenda packet was published. That's what was reflected in this agenda item. So I just want to make sure we clarify that it's still on the 13th. It's not that we're not moving the date of the meeting, we're just moving the time.
Back to the West Point, it's actually the 24th because it's every Thursday.
Okay.
August 24th, that's right.
Yes, and they start at 4 o'clock, and then there's also a free community dinner afterwards, if anybody wants to go. It's kind of a cool event.
Okay, so we're gonna, Michael, are you ready to kick it over to Mr.
Yeah,
Meyer?
so those were kind of the status updates, I guess, and Jeff's gonna kind of walk us through the cost of service study. And then we can, have to entertain questions on that.
Okay, yeah, Jeff Myers is gonna do a presentation for us here, and then we will have a public comment at the conclusion of his report. Go
Good
ahead, Jeff.
afternoon. Yes, good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board and members of the public. This is an ongoing agenda item, an update excuse me just a second, is an update on where we are on the cost of service study. And in doing this, as you can tell from the staff report, we've gone through a number of board meetings, finance committee meetings, starting actually last October, and where Habib Isaac of IB Consulting provided your board with a kind of a rate study 101 class to be able to understand the process. We then transitioned into developing a financial plan, which is the basis for a cost of service study. Basically what IB Consulting did in conjunction with staff here, we looked at our operating costs currently. We looked at our CIP, created a 5-year CIP program that went through multiple iterations. And through that process, IB Consulting created a 5-year financial plan for both the water and the sewer side that identified the expenditures that we're projecting. And those projections included inflationary increases for each of the years beyond.
Jeff, I'm gonna interrupt you, Jeff.
Yes.
Robin, who's online, Robin Hanson, your camera is off. Could you please turn or on? Could you please turn it off unless you're speaking? We will have public comment at the end of Jeff's presentation. Thank you.
I don't think she heard you.
I shouldn't hear you.
Robin Hanson, who's online, can you hear the meeting? Could you please turn your camera off until it, thank you
There-
very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff, sorry.
No problem. So the basis for the cost of service study is this 5-year financial plan. It basically identifies what we're going to be spending on operating costs and capital improvement costs over the time, that 5-year time frame. It also looks at our existing revenues and then determines what additional revenues we are going to need to balance the budget. And when I say balance the budgets, it's important to know that we have an operating budget, we have a capital improvement budget, but there's also several things that we also need to factor into when you're looking at our operations. And that is our reserve levels, which are set by policy, but also some of the reserves are set by some of our loan covenants that we have put out there. One of those loan covenants says that we need a rate stabilization fund, and we maintain that in our special or our interest reserve fund. The other part of the loan covenants that I think is, and I want to revisit, and I know I've mentioned this many times before, but for the benefit of those who have not heard it, our loans require us to have what we call a debt service coverage ratio. And this is critical to understand. We need 125% coverage ratio. That basically means when you take a look at our net revenues, which is revenues less expenses, that has to be 125% over our debt obligations, our debt service covered, our debt service obligations. And when we looked at this model in the very beginning, sewer fund was fine. It was the water operating fund that we were deficient in meeting that debt service coverage ratio. What does meeting deficient meaning? I mean, if we're deficient, what does that mean? Well, there's a number of things. One, the lenders could come in and tell us we need to increase our revenues to be able to meet that coverage ratio or reduce expenditures. And unfortunately, a lot of our expenditures are fixed. So we don't want to get into that position. The other thing it does is if we miss the debt service coverage ratio, one of those covenants, it makes it much more difficult for us to be able to issue debt in the future. And as you're aware through the conversations, and it shows up in this cost of service study, we will need to be issuing debt in the future for both the water and the sewer CIP. So maintaining good standing with our lenders and such, the debt service coverage ratio and our finances makes it not only easier for us to issue debt in the future, but we get better rates. They look upon us more favorably. So all those factors were built into the 5-year financial plan. Then Habib came back to you in May and in July at the July 16th meeting and started to talk about the actual cost of service study, which was attached to the presentation, the agenda package today. And this is the meat and potatoes where it gets down to identifying what actually the new rates are going to look like on the water and sewer side. It had been discussed early on in the 5-year financial plan. It talked about the revenue targets that are necessary to meet it, but those revenue targets that we talked about were not one-to-one related to what the rates would be increasing by. So your board looked at the financial plan, they approved it in concept. Habib came back on July 12th, issued the cost of service study. Your board adopted or accepted it in principle, and then in turn directed staff to start the Prop 218 process. That process requires us to notice all our property owners, our property owners, the customers on both the water and sewer side. It sets up a 218 hearing, which you discussed earlier. It's set for Wednesday, September 13th at 5:30 p.m. The notice also provides our ratepayers with directions if they want to protest these new rate increases. And by 218, Proposition 218, it's a majority protest. And we have on our website, or let me step back a second. In the 218 notice, it tells our customers how to fill out and submit a protest letter. We've also provided a sample of that protest letter on our website if people choose to do so. It's not necessary, but the 218 process, the letter tells everybody what they need to know: name, address, APN number, and whether or not they're protesting water, sewer, or both rate increases. And we accept one protest letter per parcel. Now, the other thing that came out of this, or that was attached in this agenda item, is your rate cost of service study, which was produced by IB Consulting. There's a lot of information in here. Some of it is very familiar to you if you've remembered the PowerPoint presentations Habib provided to your board and talked about it. So a lot of this isn't really new information. It just provides more detail on how the actual rate structure was created for both the water and the sewer side. Some of the highlights here that I want to make sure everybody understands is that right now in the water fund, we have an operating deficit for 23-24. And we cannot continue that operating deficit. One, it creates issues with, obviously we don't have enough money, but it also it affects that debt service coverage ratio. So the plan here, and this is where it's very difficult, and yes, we understand it, is that it requires about a 21% plus increase in the water rates for year one. Then it kind of tails down a little bit, but that's important to understand is we need to be able to have a balanced budget in 23-24 and meet our debt service coverage ratio. So that's kind of critical in where we are in looking at the water operating fund. On the capital side, as you're aware, we have significant infrastructure needs. When I mean we, staff that included operations, engineering, Michael and myself, we looked at our 5-year CIP program and what was actually truly critical for the district, what we needed to do. And there were a number of projects as we whittled down this 5-year project list down that were not included in this 5-year CIP. They were deferred into the next 5 years, basically years 6 through 10. Now, it's important to recognize that we have ongoing issues, and maintaining our infrastructure is not just good for our current ratepayers, it's a generational investment, because we, the district, are here in perpetuity. Way past you and me and Michael and everybody else retiring or off the board, this district still needs to be here and operating. We cannot allow our infrastructure, and when I mean infrastructure, the water treatment plants, the sewer treatment plants, the pump station, lift stations, distribution system, our intakes off our water sources. We cannot allow those to fail because we need to provide service 24/7. So what this financial plan does for a 5-year CIP, it looks at those that are critical now that we need to address. And Michael, at the end of this, I'd like you to jump in and tell us about something we learned recently on the Jenny Lynn water treatment plant, because we tried to capture everything, but things pop up, so we have to have a little bit of flexibility. So that 5-year CIP program, this study and the rates associated will fund that, and we're talking of 50 million plus program for water. It's going to be funded by a combination of, as you see in the study, rate money. It's going to be funded by a combination, including expansion funds, and these expansion funds, they derive their money from capacity fees, which are new connection fees that people pay when they buy into our system. It will also include the loans that we're talking about, the existing loan that was issued last year and a proposed new one in spring of 25. It also includes grant money that we have already been approved for, and we're working diligently to get more grant money to help defer the cost of these projects. So the capital program is a huge component of this rate plan. And yes, there will no longer be a capital R&R component of the rates in this rates. However, staff brought to the Finance Committee a recommendation for a new ordinance outlining a commitment that your board and this district has towards the capital improvement program, and it'll set a minimum threshold of money that coming out of the rate money that will go towards capital improvement programs. And it'll be similar to the level that we're getting now out of R&R, about 3.4 million on the water side, 1.2 million on the sewer. But there will no longer be an R&R component in the rates. So when we're looking at the funding for the CIP side, it's a multitude of funding sources. And just to make sure everybody knows, we always look for grant components. It's nice to be able to get some grants to help pay for these. However, some of these grants that we receive require a local funding match. And when we're dealing with the federal governments and CalEMA, it's generally a 75-25% match where we're responsible for 25%. So it's critical that our future rate revenue includes enough money for these matches, because as you're aware, you've seen all these agenda items coming before your board in the past, they require us to identify and certify that we have local revenues to provide that match. The other thing that's important to note that at the end of this study, we will be meeting our reserve targets. And that's critical to understand because one, it's not just good business practice, but we need to have reserves available to us to meet those ups and downs in our funding and our revenue flows, both for operating and capital. If you go back to the drought, our revenues went down in the drought because we were not getting consumptive revenues. So we do need to have adequate reserves. That's just one example of it. And within this study, it does talk about those reserves and provides the graph. In fact, on the water side, if you go to page 26 of the report, you will see the bar graph that shows what our reserves level are, minimum reserve levels are, and that's the red line, and where we are at the end of that process. You may look at that graph and say, wow, we've got significant reserves in 25, 26, and 27. Why do we need to raise rates? Well, those reserves also include the CIP loan proceeds. Remember, we had a $20 million water loan last year, and we're looking at another 16 million. So a good portion of those reserves include those loans. So that's just a little backdrop into that information. The other component of this, and it's addressed a little later, it's part of the rates, is that we are changing our tiered rate structure. Currently, we have 4 tiers for our rates. That's changing into a 3-tiered system. And that is described, I'm sorry, in this delivery. And just one moment, please. My apologies. The tiered rate structure is really going to be focused on, the new tiered rate structure is really going to be focused on two key items. We have average wintertime use. We've looked at that. Our consultants looked at that, and that average wintertime use is about 1,500 cubic feet. And unfortunately, I don't have the gallon conversion, but that's our wintertime usage. Tier 2 is an average summertime usage of 3,000 cubic feet, and Tier 3 will be anything above that. So if you're in the wintertime usage, you'll stay within that Tier 1 category, which is a lower cost. The next number that goes up is a summertime average at 30, and anything above that puts you into Tier 3. So that's one of the structural changes that you find in the water side.
Jeff,
Yes, ma'am.
do you know offhand on the current 4 tiers, what the cubic feet are per tier? You know, like the new one says 0 to 15 per one, 16 to 30, etc. What is the current one?
The first tier goes up to 10 CF. The next one, let me open that up. I believe it goes to 6,000, 10,000, and then above. So it goes from 10 to 60 to 100 and then above for the 14.
Okay, so say what is number 2 again?
60.
60. And then tier 3?
10 or 100, I'm sorry.
And then tier 4?
Above 100.
Anything above 100?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
So I thought what I would do, since we have both water and sewer, is to stop at this particular point in time and ask the board if they have any questions on the water side and the rate study. And I did not expect you to read through all the rate study. And again, it's very similar to what you've heard in the past, but I'll open up to questions for the rate study from the board at this point.
And if I could, unless I don't want to interrupt any questions, I have a couple of points to add on the water side as well.
Go ahead and point those out. I don't imagine we're gonna have a whole lot of questions, Jeff. This is our third time
I do.
through this, but go ahead, Director.
Jeff, early in your presentation, you used the phrase of the CIP analysis went through various iterations. I think that it went through a lot of gut-wrenching exercise to see what we could throw off of that list and push it out beyond 5 years. And I think that that's an important thing to stress, that there were millions of dollars of things that we had expected to be able to do in this first 5 years of this proposed rate analysis that we pushed off. And maybe Damon can expand on this a little bit. I mean, is it sufficient to say that you know, we've pushed off in excess of several $1 million worth of
We cut it in
work?
half.
Yeah, that's true.
We cut it in half.
Okay, but simply to say it went through iterations, it doesn't. Where are the bruises and the slashes and stuff that people suffered in discussing this? I mean, things got pushed out of your district. Fortunately, we didn't lose a thing in Copperopolis. But I'm just being.
Well, you're right, Director Thomas. It wasn't discussion. It was very heated conversation, sometimes arguments about whether or not there were enough funds to cover the priorities that we all have. And really what it boils down to is the comfort level that we as staff feel relative to the risk associated with each project. So in other words, do we feel that there's a definite impending negative impact should we not pursue the completion of these projects on this 5-year CIP. And that is the truth. These projects need to happen. And, you know, as Jeff touched upon it earlier, and Michael's talked about it multiple times, whether that be through rates, grant funds, loans, however we can do it by hook or by crook, these projects need to happen. And operationally, and I can speak for the engineering department, I think as well, when we bring that point to the conversation with the finance team, it's just naturally set up for some very tough decisions. So this is the fruit of that.
And you were compelled to have those discussions based on the reading the sentiments of your board members saying we can't, you know, we can't pass on increases that are of this magnitude. We need to do something to make it more reasonable. Maybe isn't the right word, but palatable. I just want people to understand that we haven't made these decisions in a vacuum. You know, we've tried best we can to analyze what we're dealing with here. Some of us have been in business, and we know that you can't keep your doors open very long unless you're making enough money. We're not a for-profit enterprise, of course, but we're very much dependent upon the understanding and the support of our customers, and we're hoping that they agree that we have their best interest at heart in this. I'm speaking for everybody up here. I'm sure, right? I mean, this is it's a difficult thing to go through every 5 years, but this particular 5 years has been eye-opening and surprising, and just there are bombshells around every corner. I mean, I think I've pontificated enough here, but I didn't want this to go unaddressed, that this is just not simply iterations. It was serious.
In fact, the dollar amounts, we ended up with 50 million for the next 5 years. And what did you first come to the table with? How much?
So, and I'm glad you raised this, Director Thomas, because yeah, it's easy to gloss over it, but this was several months working with Jeff and Habib, and then going back to Damon and Charles and you know, our operations and engineering leaders, and having to continuously narrow it down even further. And we're pulling projects off the list that we know are keeping us up at night because they're projects that really need to get done. And the cost to the district and the cost to our communities of not addressing those projects through planned replacement and repair versus emergency replacement and repair, the cost only goes up. We know that. We've seen it in the past. And the cost of the project goes up if we defer it. And some of the projects Jeff mentioned will be, you know, pushed to years 5 and 10 rather than in these next 5 years. There's other projects, and Damon touched on this, that we know can't wait, and they're not funded in this rate schedule. So we're going to have to find other sources of funding to get them done. Jeff mentioned the Jenny Lind intake gallery. That is a crucial piece of infrastructure. We cannot provide water to the town of Powell Springs without that piece of infrastructure, and it has significant issues that need to be addressed. It's not funded in this plan. It's one of the projects that got pulled off the list. We're going to have to find other sources of funding to get it done, other ways to get it done, and we're committed to do that. But I think it just helps.
I don't understand how you could not include that project.
Because of the financial impact on customers, really, is to Director Thomas's point.
Well, yeah, no, I'm understanding, but you're telling me that you have a project that has to get done and yet is not included, and that doesn't make sense to me.
We have to find other ways to do it. We have to either, you know, as our crews have proven over and over again until we can't, we'll find ways to get it done in-house, or we'll find other sources of funding to get them done. But some of those projects are not going to be pushed to years 5 and 10. They need to get done in these next 5 years. We just couldn't put any more upward pressure on rates than what we're already seeing in this cost of service study.
If we were realistic about this list of projects, and we talked about it being, last time I saw it was 100 million, 99 million exactly. And then we've cut it in half, so we're included about 50
No,
million,
it was 200 million.
200
That's
million.
We cut
Okay,
it to less than $100 million.
so now we're at about five.
Well, the 55 is just for the water projects in the CIP. There's another 35, I think, for wastewater projects.
And we know over this next 5 years that list, and we're going to list it in priority. We got to kind of schedule out when we're going to start planning them, designing them, and then shovel in the ground. And that's all a great plan. That's going to change in the next 5 years. We've put together a plan, and this has happened. I've been here since 2011, and these plans that are made at the beginning of the 5 years or even at the beginning of the year, rarely are they the same plan at the end of the year. Other emergencies happen, other breakdowns happen to become more that we didn't, unforeseen problems occur, other unforeseen expenses, and that list of projects that we're talking about shifts. It's a living organism kind of. It will grow, and some projects go down the list. We could kick them down. They weren't as crucial as we thought. Other projects move up the list because they're now in a much different state than we thought they would be at this time. This plan is a plan, and we're going to try and implement it. But I can guarantee by the time we get to the end of the 5 years, we will not get done every project on this list, and there will be other projects that we were forced to do just because of the reality of running a water district.
Right, and it could be the condition of the infrastructure. It could be a regulatory compliance issue that changes those considerations. It could be the availability of funding. There are times when a project moves up the list because there's a source of funding, external funding that becomes available to fund that project, and we don't want to miss out on any opportunities to bring in external sources of funding. So you're right, there's a lot of different variables that cause that list to shift over time.
Michael, you had some comments on water, but go ahead, Bertha.
Yeah, no, I wanted to go back to a statement or, something we understand that Jeff said. Our debt cover ratio is 1.25.
Right.
Okay. Have you looked at what would happen if we lowered that to 1.20?
That's not it's not that's the requirement from the lenders. And so if we fall below that debt service coverage ratio, the banks can actually step in and force us to raise rates if we don't meet the debt service coverage ratio.
Okay, so that's an external goal that we have to meet.
It's more than a goal, it's a
It's a
requirement.
requirement.
It's a requirement, and not only are there potential consequences for not meeting it, but to Jeff's point earlier, we risk our ability to borrow in the future.
Right.
And our ability to borrow is crucial to funding these projects in a cost-effective way. Because if we're left in a situation where we can only just pay as we go, essentially, for pieces of infrastructure that are going to be in service for decades, that puts 100% of the burden on of the cost for that infrastructure on current ratepayers, rather than we're fortunate as a public agency to be able to find low interest sources of financing that can spread that cost over time, over the life of the infrastructure in some cases. So it's a key part of all water agency financing, and we don't want to risk losing the ability to do that. Or, as the district has seen in the past, even our eligibility for grants. If we don't have our finances in order, we will not be able to bring in grant money. Even if you aren't obligated to pay it back, the state won't issue grants unless you meet their financial criteria.
I had another question. You mentioned that we satisfied one large financial obligation last year, or we are going to be doing one this year.
As far as debt service is concerned?
No, it was one big loan that we had taken out, and it will be satisfied.
Jeff, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I believe we're talking about the operations headquarters loan. That's being paid, that was paid off in 22-23. We have some other loans that are still ongoing. Those that generally, when you're looking at infrastructure loans like the CIP, they're more 20-year loans. The USDA loans are 40-year loans, but we do have two shorter term VACON truck loans that are only 5 and 7 years. They will fall off. The only loan that fell off this past year, 22-23, was the operations headquarters loan.
Yeah, and this is the one where we borrowed from ourselves, right?
That
To
is
fund
correct.
that. Yeah, we didn't have to go out. We borrowed from ourselves and it's paid off.
Yes, and just as a footnote to what Michael said regarding your debt service coverage ratios, that 125 coverage ratio is an industry standard. Just about every loan package I see requires that 125 coverage. So it's not just specific to us.
And then just two other quick points on water before we move on that I just wanted to touch on, and Director Thomas brought this up earlier today in a discussion, and so I think it's worth pointing out. Jeff mentioned 21% increase in the first year, but really what that comes down to, as far as the base rate is concerned, that's an impact to the customer of $12 per month. That's not to understate the significance of these rate increases there, that we realize how big of an impact it has on customers. But that's what we're talking about in year one on the water side. And then I also just want to touch to, we talked a little bit about the drivers of our cost increases. What's driving the rate increases, our cost increases. We went back and looked at, and this will be addressed in more detail in our community workshops, but there's different inflation indices that you can track, and they affect us in different ways, especially when it comes to construction costs versus just a CPI index. But we went back and looked at just the Bureau of Labor Statistics is the source for a lot of inflation indexes. And if we took our 2018 base rate, which is about $112 a month, and just applied the Bureau of Labor Statistics inflation rate, which is lower than what our actual cost increases have been, but just as a reference point, the rates to this year would be $135 as the base rate, bi-monthly base rate. We haven't kept up with that rate of inflation. We're currently at about $120 a month. The first year rate increase that would go into effect under this proposal takes us up to $137. So really, all we're doing is keeping up with the inflation that we've experienced over the last 3 years in particular. It is a significant rate increase for a water agency, but it's really just reflective of the cost increases that we have experienced. And I think it's really important to try to drive that home. That, these are sources that are outside of our control. We've done everything we can to control costs, to bring in outside sources of funding, but you have to face the reality of the cost increases that we have incurred. And that's where we are.
Okay, Jeff, let's continue on the wastewater side of the program.
Scott,
Certainly.
you ask if there's public comment on the water?
When he gets done with the presentation.
All of it,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes, and thank you, President Ratterman. The wastewater portion of it starts on page 40 of the cost of service study. And some of the issues that I brought up as far as the water fund are similar to those that you'll see in the sewer fund. However, one of the advantages that the sewer fund has, at least at this particular point in time moving forward, is that it has a balanced budget. However, there is a negative, and when I mean balanced budget, it's a balanced budget in the operating fund at this particular point in time. However, past years, as you who have been on the board for a number of years knows that we've struggled to collect enough sewer revenue to cover our costs. So our cumulative operating deficit, our deficit in our sewer fund at the end of this fiscal year 22-23 is somewhere around $1.3–1.4 million. That's negative. It's a lot better than it was earlier, but we're still having to do that, whittle away at that negative. Plus, on top of that, the sewer fund took out a loan from the water fund in the last rate study to help cover that deficit. So if you're looking at this, please keep in mind that some of the rates that we're looking at in the sewer side is going towards eliminating that negative fund balance and paying off the sewer loan. I mean, the loan to the water fund. So if you think you have a balanced budget in sewer, yes, you may, but we're still having to take care of prior year shortages. So that's something to keep in mind there. We don't have a problem with debt service coverage ratio on the sewer side. We're fine there. We are our capital outlay program, as shown here, is significant. Again, we had great difficulty in paring down the projects on the sewer side. And Director Thomas, I agree with you 100%. This was gut-wrenching because you're trying to balance out infrastructure needs, regulatory needs, not placing an excessively heavy burden on the rates to be able to fund this all at one time. So we were looking at different options, and we did move some projects out. And give me a second here. Those projects on the sewer side, including a Vallecito wastewater improvement systems, Wallace treatment plant, the La Cantena spray field, secondary bioclarifiers in copper. And unfortunately, Director Thomas, there were some projects in your area that got pushed out, lift station replacement. So there's a lot of things that are necessary that we see. We just couldn't do it all at one time. But what we were able to do, and I want to build upon what Michael said. When we take out debt, which this rate study does allow us to do, takes out an additional $6 million in debt on the sewer side to help complete some of these projects. When you issue debt, and we usually issue these on a 20-year increment, and that's fairly close to the life cycle of these infrastructure improvements. What you're doing is you're not placing the burden on current ratepayers. And that's critical because you don't want to burden current ratepayers on benefits that future ratepayers will have available to them. And that's why we take advantage when necessary and when possible to issue debt, because that means that ratepayers in years, let's say it's a 20-year loan, ratepayers in years 15 to 20 years are going to be paying for their portion of that infrastructure improvement. It's not falling on those. And I'm there, trust me. I'm one of the seniors. I'm over 65. And am I going to be here for another 20 years? I don't know, but I don't want to pay. I don't want seniors, especially those who are in the older than myself, they shouldn't have to pay for all the improvements that future generations are going to benefit from. So that's why we issue debt. And I just wanted to throw that out there. Yes, I know I'm saying the same thing Michael said, but from a financial perspective and an individual perspective, I think it makes much more sense to spread out the cost of those improvements over a number of years. And when we have USDA, it's actually spread out over 40 years. This rate model does allow, again, a funding at the end of the 5 years to fund depreciation, and that's around that $1.2, $1.4 million range. So we have that available to us. It meets reserve targets by fiscal year 27, 28. And there is one change in how we're applying the base rate in the sewer side. The proposed rate structure has the same base rate for both residential and non-residential for one EDU, equivalent dwelling units. So that base rate is the same throughout. Non-residential or commercial rates, they are adjusted by a demand factor that is pertinent to their type of business. If you have a business, and this is what the engineering department goes through when they set up individual businesses. Let's say you're a restaurant, you're using a lot more effluent or producing a lot more effluent and strengths. Your demand factor will be greater than a regular residential unit. It could be 2, 3, 4, or 5, and they multiply that by the base rate. That's how we're getting equality between commercial rates and residential rates. But the base factor, 1 EDU, is the same for each. And there are rate increases on the sewer side as well as the water side. And they basically increase about 14% for the across the board. And I'll open it up to the board for questions on the sewer side.
Except for the last year, right, Jeff?
Yes, yes. Except for the last year, correct.
So approximately 14% in the first 4 years,
14% for 4 years and then
and then what?
3.
3%. Okay.
3%.
All right, go ahead. Questions for
Yeah,
Mr. Meyer?
Jeff, you started off by saying that fortunately the sewer side is not adversely affected by the debt coverage ratio. But it seems to me that a lending institution would look at the whole operation. And if we were, for instance, below the debt coverage ratio on the water, wouldn't that influence their decision about how they would approach loaning money on a sewer project?
That's a very good question. And I want to go back to the last debt issuance that we did last year. We had separate lending institutions lend us for the water fund and the sewer fund. Since we are an enterprise fund, they are 2 separate funds and they're looked at separately. When you look at our balance sheet, everything's divided. In the back of their minds, did they say, hey, they're terrible on water. Is that going to have an influence on the sewer side? They may take that into account. What they look at, though, which was brought up in the last loan, is that we don't have a huge customer base on the sewer side.
Yeah.
We have just over 5,000 customers, whereas on the water side, it's over 13. So that does factor into it. And some of the past shortages factored into it. That's why we had to pay more. We paid a premium for our sewer loan over the water loan. Our water loan was just over 2.9%. Our sewer loan was 3%, or just 3.2% in that range. So it cost us an extra 30 plus basis points to be able to issue debt on the sewer side. And I think it's a combination, Director Thomas, of our previous shortages, the fewer customers we have on the water side, on the sewer side versus water, and they may take into account our health on the water, overall health as an agency.
Okay, thank you for that.
Cindy or Bertha, do either of you have any questions for Jeff? Michael, do you want to throw in any comments before we go to public comment?
No, I think Jeff did a great job of covering it.
You did an awesome job. Thank you very much, Jeff, for going through that again. Okay, we're going to open this up for public comment on this item, and just be in an orderly fashion. Everyone gets three minutes. And just so how public comment goes, we really don't have we can't answer a whole lot of questions, but come on up and provide your comments, please.
Thank you. How are you?
Very fine.
My name is Jacqueline Hi-Fi and I live in Poker Flat in Copperopolis. According to your proposition AM 218, I'm going to tell you a little bit why I'm a little upset. I feel that there's not really too much transparency, and I feel like we should have been, this been related to us earlier. The way I found out about the rate increase was through mymotherlode.com. I didn't have any idea, never been mailed. In fact, the first mailing I received from you was marked July 31st, and I received it August 5th. Proposition 218 states that the notices should be mailed to all customers at least 45 days. So if we are going to have a meeting September 13th, then we are short. on the 45 days.
So the notices were mailed July 25th.
31st, I have it postmarked.
I'll have to take a look at it.
I will email it to you.
Yeah. We have.
July 31st, I
We-
received it August 5th. When I opened it, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe this. So then we got on to Nextdoor, as Russ mentioned, and we did a little chatter. We had no information. And that is the reason why there was so much chatter. My bill is going to go from $336 to $580 for water and sewer. For people that are on fixed incomes, it's going to be a huge hardship for them. So I just wanted you guys to know that. You say $12 for water. Well, I don't think that's our area because it's going to go, well, because we have sewer. So I think
So
that's
that's just the base rate for water.
Right.
That's in your fleet.
And you're billed what for?
336 bi-monthly.
Monthly, so that you're gonna get a 2-month bill, so it's just $12 for 1 month. And even though you're,
So it'll be bi-monthly $580 within the 5 years. Yeah,
At the end of the 5.
if.
Yes.
If all 5, if this is passed, number 1, by
Mhm.
this board, and
Right.
number 2, if each of the 5 years are also passed by this board when they get here.
okay.
So we have a choice.
So it's forecasted for 5 years. It's not written in stone.
Exactly.
So every year you're
Things
going to,
change, the
okay.
economy changes.
Okay.
We have other sources of income.
Mhm.
We get grants.
So-
We don't have, we have less failure of other projects. It rates, we've done that before
Mhm.
when we did a 5-year rate study, we've not implemented the rates that were proposed
Okay.
for year 4 and 5. We've elected not to impose them because they weren't necessary at the time. And whether that can happen, that's a possibility, but that's this cost. We study 5 years, what it
Mhm.
costs the district, what we need to back it up. And again,
So it's,
grants aren't in, if you look at that chart,
yeah,
we do have grants in the first 2 years.
Mhm.
Grants for the next 3 years haven't been applied for yet.
right.
And chances are, we're pretty good staff with getting grants, pretty successful. But yeah,
Right.
it's a study, and then all kinds of things might change between.
There's a lot of moving parts. I understand that. And I do understand the cost of doing business. And I know that everything has gone up for everybody, but that even makes it kind of more of a crunch for, everybody. So my second topic is I just want to
I'm
make
giving
sure,
you more than 3 minutes, but if you.
but you talked about 2.
I was trying to get my-
Okay, secondly, I just want to make sure there's responsible spending going on because I live in Poker Flat. Our infrastructure, we were not promised, but they were going to do their best to replace the lines. But instead of that, they bought a $600,000 truck to fix the lines and about roughly $250,000 annual on labor cost just to come and repair the lines. We have about 4 to 5 leaks a week. The last leak went 5 days straight. And so very, very upset with that. So
if I
I'm
could just
hoping-
Touch on that issue real quick, because I think what we're seeing on that, so we've gone through different approaches to addressing that issue, both in Poker Flat and Rancho Calaveras, where we have the most significant service line leak issues. What we have implemented is saving the district money
Mhm.
by being able to do that work in-house rather than contract it out, which we tried to do before, and we realized we can do it a lot cheaper in-house. So that's why we purchased the equipment and we staffed up to be able to implement that project more cost effectively than it otherwise would have been.
But they said the project would be about $1 million. So after a couple years, we're up in over $1 million. Every year that you push it out, like you said yourself, it just costs more and more money.
It
So-
would have been a lot more than $1 million to implement that project. And that's what we looked at. We did a service line replacement project in Rancho Calaveras. We were able to replace 100 service lines for a cost of about $600,000. When we compared that to the cost of what we could do in-house, we can do the projects for about half the cost.
Okay, but eventually it does need to get done. And I hope It's not one of the projects that you took off your list.
No, that project, actually, we were asked, so we've worked with the Poker Flat HOA on the timing of the implementation of that project.
Mhm.
They don't want us there in the summertime. So
Right.
at the request of the HOA, we pulled off of that project over the course of the summer because of how busy Poker Flat is.
Right.
And we want to respect that. So we'll be back as soon as the summer season is over. We'll be
Okay.
back in Poker Flat and that project will continue.
Okay,
How about
I
the,
appreciate it. My 3 minutes are up.
how about the problems with PG&E and the overlapping
Yeah.
wires
So that's
and
a,
pipes and stuff?
and we've worked with the
Right.
Flat HOA on this.
I know
too,
about
you
the
know.
PG&E, yeah.
Yeah, we have a common sense
So-
issue there as well. So
Yeah.
it's a complicating factor that slows that project down.
I just really beg and I really emphasize on transparency and communication because a lot of people don't have the right, if I didn't come to this meeting, I wouldn't have had the right information. So now I can go and spread the information to other people, but I wish that we would just have more communication. Thank you.
I'm glad you raised that point. Just to address that really quickly. So we use a mailing service for the Prop 218 notices. They confirmed to us that the mailing went out on July 25th.
They lied.
Well, to make sure that we have the documentation.
I will have it.
But, yeah,
I'm gonna
we
email
can-
it to you.
We can take a look at it.
Yeah, the envelope on the bottom says 7/31 is when it was stamped. I received it August 5th.
Okay.
So,
We know, but what we also do in addition to the mailing is we make sure to alert all local media. We've been doing it since October. This process started in October. We've been pushing out public notices, public outreach, trying to invite people to these meetings because we've had a lot of discussion, detailed discussion about the cost of service study and the rate design. We've talked about it at town hall meetings. So we've been trying to get the word out. Unfortunately, and I understand everybody's busy and they have a lot of other things they'd rather focus their attention on. And so a lot of times people don't actually realize what's going on until they receive the Prop 218 notice, which is I think what we're seeing now. But we have the community workshops
I'll be there.
next week.
Mhm.
We're gonna share a lot of information at those
That's good.
workshops.
All right, appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask a question? When you say public media, we're talking about, letters to the customer, we're talking about newspapers, we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Nextdoor. What else do we do?
Yeah, all of the above and more. We're posting stuff on bulletin boards. We're meeting with local groups, local organizations, other local agencies. So we're doing everything we can to spread the word and make sure that people are informed about this.
Okay, excuse me. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, board, thank you very much. My name is Rick Randolph. I'm from Copperopolis. I first want to say I very much appreciate all the work you're doing to this. You hear from people when something doesn't go right. Rates go up. You're hearing from that. But I was able to go out to your website, go through your cost study report, look at some things. There's a lot of information. Grant, there's pages and pages, but I think it's all there. It really is. You're up against few users in some sense. You only have 5,000 sewer, 13.5 water, covering massive capital costs. There's a lot of costs involved. It has to be spread. I understand that. So I want to thank you for the work you're doing. I understand it. Am I happy with it? No. The only question I have is when you're looking at your rates, you mentioned grants. They're only in there for a couple of years. Well, maybe figure in what your grants are going to be over those next 3 years. Make yourself, handcuff yourself a little bit with the budget and put that in there. It would help do things because it's tough. I understand that grants come and go, but at least you have some history of where they're coming from and they may help that process too. But thank you very much.
No, thank you. And just a comment on, I did mention that we have the opportunity or the ability to not implement those rates when those years get here. And with grants, that is something that could possibly happen.
It is, and it's something we talked about a lot from a financial planning perspective. We didn't assume any income that we aren't sure about. And so future grants or grants that we've applied for, we didn't assume that those would be, that we would receive anything in those years. But to President Radigan's point, if we do, we have the ability to make adjustments to the rates.
And thank you for your kind comments. Go ahead.
Live in Valley Springs. I'm a little confused here I heard the presentation where I believe you said 21% increase the first year. So that means in 5 years, it'll be double, everything will be double?
So it's 21% in the first year. I think it's 19,
Okay.
80 over the 5-year period.
All right, for comparison, Modesto is going through this very thing right now. And their proposal is to increase costs by 20% over 5 years, 4.5% a year, so that'd be 22.5. That's a great discrepancy. I mean, obviously, we have a wider area to keep up and less ratepayers, but that's a big discrepancy. So I'm wondering what choices you didn't make, whether or not you thought, well, this is one way we could do it and this is another way we could do it. Because I'm wondering about the balance between what you pay to get into the system, your monthly base rate, I guess it's called, and then you pay extra for the water you use. Was there a thought given to maybe we should have more charge for people who use more water and keep the base rate a little lower? Was that discussed?
Yeah, it was, and we've adjusted that a little. So it actually is, the base rate portion of the rate is going down a little bit this time compared to the last 5-year rate structure. I think right now we're around 82% of the rate is the base rate. In this next 5 years, it'll be about 75%. So it is going down a little bit. What we know is though the base rate is just our baseline cost regardless of water consumption. It's the cost that we have to cover regardless of how much water customers are using or not.
But doesn't it seem fair to charge more for people who use more water? Thus, people will have a choice. Do I water my lawn this year and pay an extra X amount of dollars, or do I cut back? If you raise it on the base rate, you're charging everybody the same. You know, the person with one person in the house, the person with 5 people in the house, the person who uses a lot of water, the person who doesn't.
Yeah,
It would just seem-
make sense if our costs fluctuated based on consumption, the way you described. But
Okay.
our costs don't. So we have to recover that baseline cost because the cost that the district incurs doesn't fluctuate very much depending on consumption.
Right. And
Other
I don't,
districts are very different. Some districts, the cost of water to them is more expensive in proportion to the cost of infrastructure than it is for us. For us, for the most part, we're blessed to have water. The cost for water for us is relatively inexpensive compared to the cost of infrastructure.
okay. And lastly, I'm not sure exactly how water works. Where I live in Valley Springs, it's right near the substation on Silver Rapids Road. I don't know if because I'm closer to the substation, if my water is better than other people's, but on next door, there seems to be a universal feeling that the water is terrible. Crap, smelling sulfur all the time, black particles in it, you know, my shower's black. That doesn't happen to me. You know, and I went on there and said, I've been drinking the tap water for 13 years. It's perfectly fine. But I'm totally drowned out by people saying it's crap. So I don't know if it's crap or not. It's not at my house. But is that because I'm closer to the substation?
We do have an explanation for that, and thanks for bringing it up. Thank you for your comment.
So it's a continual battle to talk about the aesthetics of the water in Valley Springs with folks that live there. And it's because of the naturally occurring manganese in the water supply. And it has a tendency to build up in the distribution system. And so generally, if you're fed off a larger water main, or if you're further out in the distribution system, over time, it accumulates more. And so then if for some reason there's a sudden increase in demand, whether there's a fire or a water line break, or somebody draws off a fire hydrant, stirs all those particles up, and they end up in folks' homes as black particles. And it's not an aesthetic thing. It has absolutely no effect on you in terms of your public health. It's not a public health and safety risk. It's definitely it's a palatability issue. I totally agree with that. And so the district continually works both at the treatment plant and out in the distribution system to remove the manganese. If you're closer, you're most likely fed off a portion of the system that flows at a rapid rate. So you're not going to see it settle out as much. But that is why we have such an extensive treatment process at the Jenny Lind Water Plant. We have ozone. It's a powerful oxidant. It runs off electricity. We also have permanganate, which is a chemical that is expensive. All of these are an effort to reduce the amount of organic, naturally occurring constituents, and in this case, it's manganese, in the system or in the treatment facility. And then out in the distribution system, our crews continually work to flush, to try to remove all that settled mineral deposits. But yeah.
Gavin, can you talk briefly about manganese and how it affects or doesn't affect us?
Yes. So under it's called a secondary maximum contaminant. It has a secondary monitoring level, a secondary MCL. So the state requires it to be below 5 milligrams per liter within the water system. And so we comply with that throughout. And you can see that information in the annual consumer confidence report. But there's considered to be little to no effect on your person, on your health. It's not a health risk. If anything, the thought is manganese could have a laxative-like effect in great quantities, but that's well above and beyond this 5 milligram per liter requirement.
Thank you, Damon.
Yep.
Any other public comment today? Please. And there's one online. But go ahead. Oh, okay. Online. Oh, Peggy.
Hello, Peg.
Peggy, it's your turn to speak.
I just unmute the mic and that's it.
Yes, there you go. And speak. You're on.
Well, I want to tell you, I've been living here for 35 years. I've been paying my water bill every other month for 35 years. I don't drink your water. It has a terrible taste in Arnold to me. So I've been buying bottled water for 35 years. So just wanted you to know that. I don't speak water board language, and you invited us to come today. So I think it'd be better if you were using language that everybody could understand. I just have notes that I've written during the meeting. If you'd been up front when you put the water meters in, maybe this would be more palatable. You know, that could have been part of it is, you know, we're gonna have to pay, we're gonna have to upgrade the system, we're gonna have to do all this stuff. That would have given us time to get used to it, not 45 days or whatever. That would have been the time to address it. And of course, that changed everything at CCWD. I was used to the water guys coming by and, you know, reading the meter every other month. And one day they came by and I just poked a hole in my water line. This is way back in the 90s. And they came and they helped me fix it. They didn't have to. It was on my side, but they did it because that's what CCWD used to be, was very customer oriented. I wrote a letter. I said, thank you for them going above and beyond and helping me that day when my water line, when I pierced it, burying my cat. I want to know where all the money went from my last 35 years of paying bills. I don't know about you guys, but COVID destroyed my budget. It used up my reserves. I have nothing left now. So you're talking to, I don't know how many seniors live in Calaveras County and use your water. You're talking to a segment of population that's aged in 35 years into being seniors. And COVID took my savings. I didn't know there was going to be a worldwide pandemic that shut us down for 3 years. I didn't have anything set aside for a pandemic, so I used my savings. My reserve fund is empty, and you say your reserve fund is empty. So who wins? We both lose. I think you have failed your senior customers greatly because you said you can get help from a religious group or something to help pay your water bill. I, as a senior, am self-sufficient, or up until now I have been. PG&E went up, AT&T went up. Comcast went up, and now you're going up. You're out of all those, I need water and I need electricity. I pay for my electric bill now out of my weekly groceries. That comes out of my grocery budget. If I have to pay for water increase, I'll have $20 left for my groceries every week. I am curious how much the study cost. Just wondering, because you seem to be throwing around a lot of money. You've got this PR team that's working so hard to make things better. Well, maybe you should have hired the PR team when you put the meters in and gotten everything taken care of at once. So now you're paying for this study, you're paying for a PR team. We're not Beverly Hills here. We are a poor county. I thought I would live long enough to stay here and die. Now I'm going to have to move because of what's going on. Inflation, everyone's raising their prices. I haven't had a raise in 25 years. I have no extra money to give you guys. So this is one senior you're hearing from. I don't know how many more are out there. And during COVID, of course, we saw all the people come up here and snatch up all the houses for sale. And then they moved 10 and 20 people into those houses. And now the VRBOs, or whatever the heck you call them, are renting out to 20 people a weekend. Why shouldn't they be charged for how much water they're using? I didn't water last year at all. My garden was non-existent. I had planned on planting my garden this year and watering the heck out of it. Now I'm glad I didn't. I would have been killing myself trying to have a garden and getting a bill I can't afford. And I just really think that you say you have our best interest in mind is not true. I say that's baloney. You do not have your seniors' best interest in mind. I guess that's
Peggy, do you have some closing comments?
I did, but my 3 minutes are up.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry I came. I heard too much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments. Go ahead, you're in the room.
Peggy Willis. Just piggybacking on what this other Peggy just talked about, and not to be specific in different bills or different stresses, but my bill will double over 5 years. Basically, we'll be paying about over $300 a month just for water. And water is not something like you could do without your TV. You know, you could do without a cell phone if you had to. You can't do without water. This is a basic essential item, and we kind of can't live our lives without water. I think I was actually shocked when I moved up here about how much the water is. I mean, I've never paid this much for water anywhere I've lived. So I was already thinking it was high, but that would double and I'd be paying over $600 every 2 months. I'm just wondering, I live in a community with a lot of seniors. I personally know a number of people that are on disability and have various types of disabilities. I'm just wondering if it's been considered or talked about how you could help people to meet this kind of exorbitant bill. Has anybody discussed any kind of programs or anything?
We've talked about it a lot, and we do understand the impact it has on people. We feel it too. If there was any other way that we could do this, we've explored it. What we can't do, or legally prohibited from doing as a water agency, is charge different classes of customers different rates. So we can't give people a discount based on income status or any other status. We're not allowed to do that. What we have to do as a water agency is just evaluate the cost of delivery, cost of service, which is what this study does. It evaluates what the cost of providing the water and wastewater service we provide is, and then we distribute that among customers. There's no profit. It's just what is the cost of this operation, and then how do we distribute that among our customers? But we can't take things like income level into account as much as we would like to. We do have a little bit of other, we have other sources of income that we can use. And so we do have a customer assistance program, but it's small compared to the impact that this has on ratepayers. We understand that. But there's really very little flexibility for water agencies to take any of that into account. We're really constrained to evaluating the cost of service and then charging the rates to make sure we collect enough revenue to pay for the cost of service.
So you're saying you feel our pain, but you can't help,
So
basically.
we have the small customer assistance program.
Right.
There's been a lot of discussion that we've been involved in over the last couple of years of finding, among state agencies and federal agencies, finding ways to provide assistance to low income ratepayers. And there is a program that's available right now that can help people who have past due debt for utilities. That's not enough. That's what we've been telling the state, that we have low income ratepayers that are going to really struggle to cover these costs. And we understand that. And so we're pushing for them to actually roll out the funding that they've said is going to be available to help those classes of customers that need help. We're prevented from doing that.
Right. Even
is there-
PG&E has a program to help people that are having difficulty. But the other thing too, that my
Let
experience.
me interrupt you before you move on to another subject. Is there room in our customer assistance program right now?
I'd have to check with customer service. I don't think there is, as far as water customers go. There was at one time for wastewater. I'm not sure if there's still.
And there's a waiting list.
A waiting list to get the assistance?
To get the assistance. It's a set
Because
dollar.
our
dollar
program
amount.
is pretty small.
It's just pretty small. It doesn't
Resources.
provide a whole lot. But
Mike,
go
can we
go ahead
put
on to
that-
your next.
The customer assistance on our next finance meeting, because I have a couple of things I want to talk about on
Sure.
that.
Yeah.
When I'm there.
Go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, the other thing I just wanted to say too is that, like to have a service that basically doubles and we get no advance. I mean, it's like you get nothing more than you got before when, like when it doubles in cost, but it doesn't double in any delivery of anything. That's really hard to swallow. Just my view. Thank you.
Same.
Thank you. Is it
Francisco de la Cruz, and I have an online friend that might pipe in on his own, but in my own world of work, I was exposed to something called best practices. I had the opportunity to serve as vice president of human resources for a couple of companies, and we really like to do those kinds of things. And looking at your presentations and your data, I don't see anything that kind of puts you like in a context. The previous speaker, Peggy, I guess, as her name, was mentioning, some things that could help us understand what are we getting for this? We're doubling the amount of money we're going to be paying, but what specific benefits as experienced by the end user are we going to be getting? Is it going to be more reliable service, less leaks, quicker response times, cleaner water? What is it that 50 some odd or 90 some odd total $1 million is going to buy us? The other thing I would ask you to consider is you only have 53 employees. Was that inaccurate?
We have 75.
75. Well, there's a site called Transparent California, and I think everybody's going to it. As a retired HR executive, I am shocked at the salaries that this county pays. Not just your organization, but the entire county administrative complex. I am just amazed that we, of only 18,000 paid employed people in the county, are supporting that kind of public administration. It just shocks me. And the only way that happens is y'all voted for it. And so how is it that we get so out of line with what the general population can earn out in the open market and what the administration of the county governments or the county public agencies pay themselves? How can it be so out of sync? I used to do salary studies. I used to pay $20,000, $30,000 to get a salary study across an industry. I think the community governments are starting to do the same, or have been doing the same thing for a number of years, to the point now that it makes more sense to work for government than it makes to work in private. It used to be flip-flopped when I was out working around. The only reason you work for government or a public agency is because they had great benefits. Everything else about it was lousy. Now you got great benefits, great compensation, and you still have customers that are saying, we ain't happy. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I don't know how many people are going to actually take the time to take that ballot and vote it. If the indication of next door is anything, well, you'd expect this room to be full. So I don't know if it's a lot of noise and this will all happen. And I don't know how many people are going to be projected to leave the county, because everything is going up. As you know, landfill's going up. This is going up a lot more than inflation, which I don't understand. How can it go higher than inflation unless you're spending a lot more than you should be? You know, I don't understand it. And I would ask that you find a way to help people that have a whole lot less more invested than I do in this situation to understand it. I mean, I went to grad school. I should be able to understand it. Doesn't make sense to me.
Excuse me, you
Yes.
cited
Yeah,
Transparent. what was
Transparent
it?
California.
Transparent California.
Yeah, and it only has 53 employees. And, you know, 20 years ago, $150,000 was a lot of money. You got a lot of guys making a whole lot more than that now, here, 20 years later. And not having, I had responsibility for over 600 employees, and I barely cracked 130, 140. You know, doesn't add up.
Transparent California has a lot of gaps in its information. If you go actually to our website, it shows the salary ranges for each of our positions. And then there's a link there to the state website that we have to report to that tracks that data. But there's fewer gaps in the data there. We do exhaustive comp studies. We do comparisons with other agencies, similar agencies, the agencies that we're competing against in the labor market. And if we're not competitive with those agencies, we're going to lose, because we require highly skilled staff to run this operation. And if we're not competitive, and we have lost staff in recent years to other agencies, because we're not high, that's for sure, compared to other water agencies. And you know, we don't pay as much as some agencies where we've lost staff to. So and over the last several years, the portion of our budget that we spend on salaries and wages has gone down. It's all of the other costs that are going up, that's what's driving the rate increase.
I would share all that as frequently as you can.
I definitely would invite you to the community workshops next week. We're gonna have all of this information available. Yeah, we'll have all this information available there.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. And there's someone online who would like to speak. Do you have a name? Glenn?
Yes.
Glenn, are you ready? Go ahead.
Yep.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yep. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak for a couple minutes. Watching all this is really just mind blowing. I can't get over the fact that the gentleman that just spoke with the white shirt on and Human Resources made some great points. Your increases that you're proposing are way beyond what the inflation rate is right now. And some of these questions I'm going to ask, you don't need to answer them because we have, so much time, short on time. Why is it that the customer, it says in your statement that came out, it says the proposed rates are necessary to maintain district's eligibility for millions of state grants and low interest rate loans. Why do we have to pay for that? Typically, also in an inflationary market, you put a freeze on everything. Now, all of a sudden, it seems like the water district is talking about all these infrastructures that it's got to be done right now. It's like all of a sudden this just happened. Why weren't there more projects being done prior to letting them get to the point where now all of a sudden it's an emergency? And it just baffles my mind about that. If I'm a resident in Copperopolis, and I live in Copperopolis, and I am a senior. I am going to be out of town. I want to go to the workshop. Am I able to go to, say, for example, Ebbets Pass?
Yes, absolutely. And the workshops will also be available virtually, but yes, they're all going to cover the same general information, and anybody can go to any of them. They're open to the public.
You know, as a business, when you have loans that you're talking about and all the debt that you have, it almost sounds like, because I'm not in the water business, so I don't know what the industry standards, quote, are supposed to be. But it seems to me that if you're a company that's in debt, you're not operating and running your business the way you should be if you incur that kind of debt. Another thing is, what about solar to offset the electricity costs? You talk about electricity costs. Why don't you look at solar? You know, the letters that people are going to turn in that have to be 6,000 some odd letters of opposing the increase. Who's going to count those? How do we know in the public that we can assure that that's going to be taken care of?
And one for sewer and one for water. That's ridiculous.
Huh? I do want that question answered.
Yeah, so I'll touch on a few of those, and we're going to we're also putting out a frequently asked questions document that I think will address a lot of these questions as well. First on solar, so we have looked at that in the past. As I mentioned before, the power, we get a discounted rate for power through the Calaveras Public Power Authority. Because of that, in the past, when we've looked at on-site solar to offset our electricity demand, the projects don't pencil out. Not the same way that they would if you were paying a commercial PG&E rate. So it wouldn't have been cost effective for us to do that in the past. As the CPPA rate increases and gets in the discount from PG&E decreases a little bit, that might change. So we're going to reevaluate whether those projects might provide a bit more benefit than cost. But in the past, because we get the discounted power rate, they didn't make economic sense for the district. On the protests, so the protests have to be sent to the district or delivered to us. You know, we have to get them in writing. And we track, we verify that the protest was received from a landowner that is eligible to submit a protest. We keep a master list too, so people can verify that their protest was received and counted. So it's all very transparent. So that the district administers that process, but all of that information will be available.
Okay.
Is there another question, Glenn, that you wanted answered here?
Yeah, real quick on the proposed
Yep.
tiered water usage rate, tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 60, 100, and then over 100. Is that 10 cubic feet in the first tier, or is that, what is that?
Okay,
I didn't
that's
quite understand
that's the
terminology.
current, you're talking about the current tiers. The proposed tiers are a little different than that. And I think
There's
No.
no cubic foot included, so you have your
Well,
base
in the
rate,
basement,
right?
he's talking about the tiers.
Right,
I think
so
that's
the
in
tier.
terms of cubic feet.
HCS.
So,
So
is the
10 would be
you said-
1,000 cubic feet.
I'm sorry,
10 would be 1,000 cubic feet.
10 would be 1,000 cubic feet. Okay, but you know the base rate, it's not hard to do the math. The base rate for water and sewer the first year would be $45 increase by monthly bill. Again, I'm going to just hammer home the fact that this increase is way exorbitant. It's almost double at the end of 5 years. And I did like the fact that you were talking about if and when the inflation subsides, which we all know it will, that we would get some kind of adjustment made, because again, this is just mind blowing. I mean, the amounts that you're asking for are crazy, and you got us over a barrel because we have to have water and we have to have sewer. And you talk
Okay,
about in your.
I'm
letter
going to
that
ask you,
have-
Glenn, to wrap up your comments. You're
Yeah,
way over
yeah.
on your time. Thank you.
And
Thank you,
you've
sir.
already got funding in $14 million in grants, plus 13 million in direct federal funding. I would ask that you put a freeze on the things that you're doing, and you need to wait until this inflationary market has subsided to try to do some of these projects instead of putting it on the residents.
So
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comments, and I'm glad you raised that last issue, because I think it's something that's really important for us to communicate. In a lot of cases, in almost every case, the cost to the district of waiting on some of these infrastructure projects will be significantly greater and more impactful on the community than doing planned replacements as we move forward. And to your earlier point, we have done, this isn't all of a sudden. We've been dealing with this issue for a long time. We've completed a lot of infrastructure projects, especially in the last 10 years. We've been working really hard to address the aging infrastructure issue, but a lot of agencies are in the same situation that we're in, and they're going through significant rate increases as well, because the age of the infrastructure is past it's at the point of failure. And we can't, as several people here today have pointed out, water is so essential to our communities. We can't fail. We are not in a business where failure is an option.
Yeah, we can't get to the point where we have no water days. That's not going to happen.
Right.
We will always have water days. You will always turn on your faucet. Water will always be there. To that point, Michael, could you have any numbers, or Pat or Damon, do you guys have numbers on capital improvement projects going backwards?
We'll have that.
I mean, we have
too.
been addressing problems. We have been spending this money. It hasn't been piling up. And I don't think it's even possible to stop doing construction projects to replace this aging infrastructure without putting ourselves in that position that we might have no water days in the, you pick up your phone and call, hey, are we serving water today or not? That's not going to happen. But
right.
we have been
And
addressing
the cost of delay sometimes is much more impactful on the community, which we've seen in recent years. The costs of our projects have gone through the roof, which in my mind, it doesn't mean we stop. It means we need to do them faster. And we need to continue to address the aging infrastructure issue that we have. And the longer we wait, the more expensive they get, the bigger the impact is on the community, especially if we run to failure on any of the infrastructure.
And do we have just a quick presentation of approximate numbers on millions in water and wastewater over the past year or 2 years, 5 years?
We intend to provide a detailed breakdown of the projects that have been completed over the past 10, 11 years at the town hall, tens of millions of dollars at the town hall meetings, but just off the top of my head, Techite pipeline replacement. So this was replaced a pipeline that failed every couple months, drained a 70,000 gallon tank. We'll provide you information related to that. Reach 3A, which has replaced significant amount of water main through the town of Arnold, old tar wrapped steel pipeline. That was a significant cost, significant improvement. That's the one highlight is these projects are significant improvements to the infrastructure. Redwood tanks, 5 of them up on Ebbets Pass are being replaced. We just entered into the bid period for a project to replace a Redwood tank in Copperopolis and rehabilitate a steel tank. And once we realized we were actually in the bid period, we shut the Redwood tank off. It's leaking that bad. So the infrastructure is to that point.
Selling the red.
The contract. I don't think I've ever been asked that question, but in all seriousness, the contractor that is the successful bidder quantifies the profits based on the Redwood, and they would receive the Redwood.
We get value because it is gorgeous.
So it's a reduction in overall expense of the project. Yeah. Yeah. I don't need to be convinced.
Just those projects, so Reach 1 was almost $10 million project. Reach 3 was, I think, 4 or 5. Techite was about 4 million. The West Point, Wilseyville wastewater consolidation project is another 10 million. That's about halfway done right now. And these are just, like I said, just off the top of my head, we're doing a lot to address the infrastructure, but we have a lot more that we have to do.
And those will all be listed and itemized at our town hall meetings. We've already heard about the.
We have
lines from
breakdowns of
Yeah.
expense and documents and handouts.
All right, thank you, Dan.
If
Appreciate
we
it.
can make a quick comment, I think he said, why don't we freeze things? I understand we can't do our CI freeze our projects. I get that. But what about our operational costs? And maybe we're only freezing 300,000 or 600,000 a year, but that's helpful. Maybe we don't get to buy any new cars for the next 5 years with our lease program or no other large equipment because it would be beneficial. If it's a safety thing, I get it. But if you can show where, when you go to these meetings of where we've saved that, we're not buying those cars anymore. We're, forwarding the cost to use your credit card to the customer, not us, which everybody ends up paying for, and even though they don't use it. So it's just, I would like to see where we haven't done it yet. Where can we without sacrificing safety or not getting jobs done, that kind of thing? We obviously can't control healthcare costs. We can't control because we're a union and we're in a contract with labor. But what about this lease program?
We have done that, and we're only buying equipment or vehicles where it's cost effective for the district.
Yeah, but see,
So-
that's where I disagree with you, Michael. You guys always say it's cost effective, but at some point, you need to get that cost effectiveness over a 5 or 10 year period. And I just think that you really need to share with folks where you have lowered that, where you stop doing that. And I think the leased vehicles are a good thing. And I think with the electric vehicles, regulation says we have to have these done by 2032. I think you ought to just sit tight on that too, because the way California's going, it may not be that bad. I think at some point we will be one of those first responders, but those things, it may not be in the millions like our projects, but it is somewhere that we could cut back, and it's 50,000 here or 10,000 there. It just adds up, and at least it'll show with the ratepayers where we may have to go higher here, but here's where we're pulling back. It would, as a ratepayer, it would make me feel better.
So you mean I have to send those 10 electric vehicles back?
Yes, you do.
But in all seriousness, you can look at the operations GLs and you can see that budget year over budget year, many of those line items either remain static or they go down.
Okay.
Specifically fuel, we talk about fuel expenditures. 2021, 22, we were over $100,000 more in fuel expenditures than we are currently. And that's in absence of, I don't know how many atmospheric river storms we had to deal with from December, Christmas through the middle of March. And all of our crews worked an amazing amount of overtime driving those vehicles. And so that's a consideration. And then, and more to the point of the town hall meetings, you will see direct facts based on all of those line items through our purchasing agent. So the district was smart enough to create a purchasing agent position in 2019, bring that person on board. And there's reflection on the cost savings that person has provided to the district operationally. And moreover, our field folks, their focus is cost effectiveness. I mean, if anybody second to customer service, I would say, interacts with the public on a routine basis is the folks out in the field. And so they are very mindful of being frugal, being cost effective. And when they have to get purchases approved through the purchasing agent, it's all the more
And
relevant.
that needs to be shared with everybody to see what we're doing. But to the electric vehicles?
No,
So-
we're not.
I'm just kidding.
Yes, but I was gonna say, because,
2027 is the date, not.
Yeah, it's
but what I'm with the electric vehicles, we may save on fuel, but what's the electric cost?
Well, exactly right. Yeah. So we would then have to think about charging stations and generators and trailers to go pick them up and take them over to here to get them charged. There's a whole host of things to consider. And we are considering all of those things.
Perfect.
Yeah.
But
Garrett.
we do that cost cutting effort every year. We go through that. It's all very transparent. Where we have discretion in the budget, we're very lean as a district. Where we can't control costs is what has impacted us most in the last couple of years.
Okay. We'll just make sure you have that.
Ask a question based on something I heard before in the discussion about solar and PG&E. Ballpark figure, how much do we pay PG&E per year?
So our power bill, we pay the Calaveras Public Power Authority. The PG&E portion of that bill, it goes through, we don't pay PG&E directly. We pay CP, well, actually.
How much?
Anyways, a dollar amount is we're at $2 million a year now. Just for electricity.
Not directly to PG&E, unfortunately.
So that's our total electricity cost, about $2 million.
So I'm asking, someone else mentioned.
Sir, could you come to the microphone so
Everybody
people
can hear.
online can appreciate what we're talking about?
Yeah. Someone else mentioned the PG&E Care Program. Are you aware of that?
Yeah.
Everybody knows about that. Okay, a lot of people don't know about it. I didn't know about it. I found out about it and I qualified for it because it's an interesting thing. It's not, they don't count what you have as assets. They only count what you have to spend per year. So if I have money in a CD, that doesn't count against me. So I qualified for that. I'm wondering if with such a large number, a couple $1 million, assuming it was going to PG&E, which I guess it isn't, I'm wondering if there is or should be some kind of a program for poor counties. And obviously, you compare us to Beverly Hills, we're dirt poor, right? But we're a poor county. Shouldn't PG&E have some sort of a program for counties that spend really a large amount of money with them? Might be a drop in the bucket to them, $2 million a year, but it seems like a lot. What if the care program cuts off almost 40% of my PG&E bill? What if we had 40% of that $2 million knocked off, and that could in some way be reflected in lower rates for people? And of course, the stick with that's the stick with that is PG&E. If you won't do that, we're going to have to look very seriously at solar.
So get a good discount with CPPA.
Right.
So
we
if
pay
we were
less than-
directly PG&E, we'd probably pay double. We'd probably pay $4 million a year or something.
Okay, well,
So
I just
No, thank
heard
you
those
for your
things and I
comments.
thought I'd try and draw them.
Throwing ideas around. Appreciate it. Any further public comment in the room?
Still a hand up. Wrong.
And I talked today with some people and nobody ever seen it. So I'm wondering, can I pick up some here? Is there
Yes.
somewhere to pick them up here?
Yeah, we.
They're in the
can
lobby
some
right there,
copies.
too.
Yeah, I think
Oh, maybe in a rack or something?
yes,
we
so
can
you
print
go
out
to the
some
door to the
copies.
left.
Okay, thank you.
No, I don't
I
think we
think
have
I
to.
got it. You didn't put that one out there?
We can print some out.
Does customer service have any in available to
Probably
window?
not on hand, but we can.
Okay.
We can. print.
Those aren't in the rack right out there? That
Those are all about the workshops.
Oh, okay.
Hang around. We'll get you some. Ralph, come on up. For your 3 minutes of fame.
I reclaim all my time. Ralph Copeland, Copperopolis, how you all doing? Look a little bruised and battered. Jeez. Okay, addressing Copperopolis real quick. I understand the frustration coming out of Copperopolis, but please understand CCWD has a ton of work being done for us right now. A lot of that includes grant work, and a lot of that includes the CIP work. So we're very fortunate in that aspect that we have a lot of development, a lot of construction with the infrastructure in Copperopolis, though more needs to be done, of course. Since Mr. De La Cruz mentioned the town halls and what you may need to address, I had put together something earlier this year, And by the way, I've been attending about 2 years of meetings, and I've been the only person in here, so it's nice to see on audio and in presence some representation from the public. Glad to have you on board.
Ralph, if I could interrupt you for a second, during that 2 years, you've heard discussion fairly frequently about the need to look at raising rates and.
Oh, yeah, I'm going to address that right here, Russ.
But that for this particular board member, it is really disconcerting to hear people say, we never hear anything about this.
Mm-hmm.
And we hear, we were talking about it constantly, but to a room full of empty people, except you're here all the time. So, I mean,
I think with Mr. Osborne, you have a very good PR man, and I've seen the outreach he's done on our social media, and I think hopefully that will remedy this problem.
Well, yeah, and we're constantly trying to improve that, and it just seems like that our best efforts are not recognized, or something. That's just, it's a disconnect. But sorry, I interrupted. Go ahead.
Okay.
Get your time back.
When you're at these town meetings, again, and you've heard this, and I'll say it for the new folks, emphasize the application processes and the receivership of grants. CCWD, state and federal lobbyists working for project financing, address the Corps of Engineers with the assistance of Senator Feinstein and Representative McClintock. These guys have taken our wastewater treatment grant from 1 million to 11 million, and now they want to take it to 17 million. So that's great stuff working in the background for us. Developing lines of credit for water and sewer development is very hard, which you see that you have a debt service ratio that you have to meet, which isn't easy and which you have to protect. Installation of an electronic metering system, which will improve accuracy and lessen waste, again, helping us. Damon mentioned being proactive with the creation of an independent repair crew. It's very important having skilled field CCWD employees doing work that normally would be outsourced. I was in the industry for 35 years, and I know what it is to repair an actuator on a Pratt Mueller Deseric butterfly valve, plug valve, or any other actuated valve. And you do this in-house. A lot of metal fabrication, a lot of, may I say, backyard fabrication and know-how is used by internal services. Your excellent response. People forget what happened during the winter. These guys kept the water on, they kept the sewer on, they kept us going. Just the work they put into for the summer and well, during the winter storms and during the summer, especially during our fire seasons. Luckily this year, so far, we're okay, but during the fire seasons can be just as tough, if not more, than the winter. Equipment purchases, which will pay for themselves through the long run, though the paving machine, I still question. You developed, and this is the best thing, guys, they've developed a proactive, hardworking internal team led by GM Michael Minkler, which includes engineering, accounting, and customer service. These folks don't come cheap, as inexpensive as what was here before, but boy, oh boy, after 2 years of watching them in action, they're doing one hell of a job. In regards to what Mr. Thomas, Director Thomas was saying, as far as communication, all you have to do is go to the CCWD website, navigate your way through, put yourself on the mailing list for the CCWD board meetings, put yourself on the mailing list for the CCWD subcommittee mailing list. What you want is to get on those subcommittees, come in here and get down to the brass tacks. And you get messages. Rebecca sends out within a week, you get a message of the agenda, the time, and the location is 99.9% here in this room. I have to reluctantly agree with the price increase, though my family is blessed to absorb these costs. My neighbor is another story, and my neighbor is a Peggy. Okay. Okay, I already said, okay, you're gonna have to do some explaining, which you've already heard about the debt service ratio. But also this increase is gonna fund taking care of $50 million of our infrastructure replacement. And that's important because, as Michael, I believe, stated, we have over 200 million. So this is gonna lop off 50 million and leave us with 150 million less.
Gonna have to ask you to wrap.
Okay.
Closing comments, Ralph.
Okay.
But he's saying some good stuff.
He is saying some good.
Okay.
Be fair.
I noticed on all the board meetings, there's no time limit. So it could be 3 hours, 1 hour, a half hour. Okay. And then finally, Jeff Meyer said in previous meetings that things could have been done differently in the last 2 rate studies, particularly the last rate increase, which would address the CIP projects and their costs much better. Hopefully the board will learn from what Jeff was talking about and make amends. That's the end.
Thank you, sir.
Any comments, questions? No, gotta go.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Okay, we have one more person online, Karen.
Oh, how are you?
Hello. Oh, you're good.
My concern is I've watched repairs being done here in Poker Flats, and within hours of repairs, we've got more leaks at the same location. And so then they have to come back out and redo it again. Why is this happening so often here?
Okay, that we got a thank you for the quick question, and we got a quick answer coming to the mic right now. What's going on in Poker Flat?
Yes, so the service lines we were having this conversation with earlier, were not necessarily installed properly back in the 70s when they were installed. And so as a result, there's all kinds of material that pushes on that service line that can poke holes in it. And over time, there become more and more leaks on these service lines. So what you end up with is you have a leak on a service line, and we send out a distribution crew, and rather than work to replace the entire service line, which could take 8 to 10 hours, they can bore down on the actual leak and put a repair clamp on it. Solves the problem. So it's a short-term solution, but invariably, as you recognize, another leak pops up. And so we have to send a crew out, bore down, put a repair clamp on. And so we have kind of a twofold process to address these failing service lines in Poker Flat and throughout Calaveras County in our service areas, because we have significant issues with these, not only in Poker Flat, but also other parts of Copperopolis and in Valley Springs and Rancho Calaveras. And so we do have a crew, we call it the underground crew or the utility crew, that spends all their day replacing service laterals. So if a distribution crew identifies, hey, this one is just going to cause too much property damage, or it's a safety risk, it's out in the road, it's creating a pothole, we're going to still blow down on it, for lack of a better term, and put a repair clamp on it. But we're also going to let the utility crew know that they need to come in and replace that service lateral, so we can get the benefits of both crews. We can have a quick and efficient repair, but we can also plan more long-term to replace that service line. And we're going to do so in Poker Flat. We got to start in the spring, and then unfortunately we have to get out of there so we can so we don't negatively impact all the residents that are there throughout the summertime. But as we move into fall, we will jump back into Poker Flat and replace service lines.
Okay, and I understand what you're saying there, but there was new lines put in, my understanding, on Bret Hart and Jimmy Way, and that night there's more leaks, and I thought they just replaced the pipe there. The water line.
So there was, right. So there were a few service lines that were replaced as part of so we have what's called our collections system lift station rehabilitation project. Mm-hmm. And a big portion of that project is happening in Poker Flat, off Bret Hart, off Jimmy. And we were able to replace some of the service lines. However, there are also, so we have two kind of projects happening at the same time. One's a wastewater project to replace wastewater infrastructure. And while that project was lying fallow, say the crew had a couple days off, our crew was able to then jump in there and replace some services. Now, relative to the second additional failures, those are not the new services that were replaced, but the other services that are associated with the distribution system overall. We weren't able to get in there and just wholesale replace all the services along that wastewater pipeline alignment, just some of them.
Okay. Yeah, it just concerned me that we're spending a lot of time, and time is money.
Oh,
to have to keep
yeah.
coming out, repairing them or plugging them and doing a patch job on them that isn't lasting.
Completely understand. And really the focus there on Bret Harte was, while we have the ground open up, the street opened up, let's get some of these services replaced, because we would hate to also have to come back and tear the brand new asphalt up to replace the service line, to put a patch in it, only to have to come back later. So we recognize your concern, and it's the same concern that we share with you.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Karen.
Damon, if you could just listen to my, this is my own personal observation about what happens to these lines. There's a minute vibration that occurs in the line, even though it's buried down in the ground. You turn on a faucet and it jumps a little bit. And the low bidder that put those lines in at the beginning, they backfilled with rock. This native material went back in the ditch. If you have a sharp point on a rock, sometimes we see pictures where there's a circle or a saddle clamp every foot for 6 feet. All these things occur because of that sharp rock interacting with that pipe. And so it's fairly clear to me that you could go down and you could fix one, and then a foot away beyond your field of view, it maybe the work that you did caused the leak to occur in a spot where you can't see. You know, we backfill with sand as the standards are now, but I mean, this is really quite a phenomenon that occurs. I mean, even I saw some pipes in Saddle Creek when a year or two after they put all their PVC pipes in the ground over there was a hole in a pipe caused by a rock. Unbelievable. But
yeah, and we can
all the
we can repair it in multiple ways. Oftentimes, our distribution crews, if they see a repair clamp right next to the leak that they're experiencing, they'll cut a section out. So not only will we have, open up the ground, put a full circle clamp on the repair and walk away, we also have cut sections out and install 6, 8, 5, 2 feet, whatever, 8 inches to 20 inches of new service. And then we also have the crew that replaces the whole thing. And so we're trying to address it as comprehensively as we can. We're very mindful of throwing good money after bad, stepping over a dollar to save a dime. But really, when it comes to the integrity of public health and safety, if we need to make a repair, we're going to make a repair. It doesn't mean that we're never going to come back to that service line and replace it. We are. But we also recognize that we can't just let water blow out on the ground all over the place also. So we need to make that repair. Yeah.
Michael?
I just wanted to circle back to a point that Ralph made. It's really great to have this much input and feedback from the public today. We don't often see this. Everything, we're a public agency. Everything we do is open to the public. We work really hard. It's always been a high priority of this board for us to be really transparent. So we work really hard to be transparent. As Ralph mentioned, our committee meetings are open to the public. We dive into the weeds of a lot of this stuff. And so really encourage more people while you're here to sign up for those mailing lists that Ralph mentioned, because we're part of the community. The employees here live and work here, care deeply about the communities that we serve. And I just really appreciate people being here to hear from us directly, and hopefully you can see the dedication that our board and our staff have for our communities.
And those committee meetings are Engineering Committee, Finance Committee, Legal Affairs Committee, and External Relations Committee. You can find all of them on our website. And Ralph is accurate. He's one of the few in the entire community for this entire year that has shown up regularly to our regular board meetings, and now he is showing up to committee meetings. We do welcome input. Actually, it's very, very helpful to get input from the public, and appreciate his efforts. And anyone else who'd like to join him at these meetings and regular meetings, be certainly welcome.
One more thing first, though, is if you don't have access to internet and whatnot, you can call us and ask to get those agendas mailed to you. Yes, you can, right? Is that go away in the Brown
We
Act?
don't have a mailing list where we send out.
But isn't that part of the Brown Act that you can either get it, email or mailed to you? You might want to look into that because I think it is. So for those who don't have internet or, internet access, how are they going to know? And do we post them at a public place still?
Yeah, we post.
Okay,
them
post
out
office
here.
or something.
Yeah.
Now I hear where they go regularly, a grocery store or something, but
Valley Springs News.
No, not, excuse me, not.
No, just
That would be a pretty significant expense. We don't post all of the meetings. We post the ones where public hearing notice is required to be in the.
I just don't want us to be narrowed on everything is via the internet, because not everybody has it. In my district, we have terrible internet. So and with the rate increases, perhaps maybe people aren't going to be able to afford internet. Just saying. Your turn.
Okay, go ahead, cut. But if you make a comment, please come up to the microphone so that everyone online can hear. Thank you.
Francisco de la Cruz again. Do you all use something called MailChimp or Constant Comment, to track to track your email interactions, to get an idea of what kind of penetration you're having in the community, or is that too far to push the organization?
Constant Contact is a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, it helps you understand.
Expense monthly.
Well, certainly, but nothing is free in this, and it's something, you got to make your
I don't think
choices.
that we do. I've never heard that we.
Okay,
that we do.
well, you're starting to use Nextdoor, right? Because that's a freebie. Okay, and this community is very vocal on Nextdoor, especially about things that hit the pocketbook. So if you would turn up the use of that, they have surveys on there that you could do. Hey, what if we did? And you get maybe a very small response, but more than you're getting now. And then if you start getting some of these subcommittees with constant comments, so you get your mail stuff back, you get an idea of, are we having an impact? Is it making any difference? Because right now, that's what it sounds like out there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Copeland Copperopolis, your CCWD board meetings, maybe consider one a month or one every other month in the evening. I understand that may cost overtime for some of the guys, but just like to propose that. Maybe External Affairs have it in the evening, being that it's External Affairs.
Good, thank you.
I have that on.
All right, we're still in public comment for the item 4A on our agenda. Any further public comment? Okay, seeing none, we're going to move on to
Public comment that got written in, and again, it's coming up that there's a PR firm. Can we talk about that a little bit?
I'll address that. So there's some confusion earlier. When I referenced the public relations team, that's not a PR firm. That we're not paying an external consultant for that. That's an internal team within CCWD that Rebecca, Kelly Gerkensmeyer, Kelly Richards, Stacy Lawler, Kate Jesus, others have just come together to focus on public outreach, especially during this time. So it's internal CCWD staff who have taken on an additional burden during a difficult time. I think they're doing a phenomenal job, and I think you'll see that during the community workshops next week. But it's not an external consultant that we're paying for. We did hire a consultant because this is a complex water district, both on the water and wastewater side. So we wanted to make sure we're right about everything in the 5-year financial plan. It's a really foundational document for us. And it's very industry standard for water agencies to use. consultants to help develop the cost of service study and the rate design as you go through this 218 process. So yes, we used a consultant to develop the cost of service study and the new rates, but not for public relations.
And we did have a question, just to reiterate, if you're a sewer and water customer, you're still one customer for CCWD. So that's one protest letter per customer. Per property.
And that's Prop 218. That's not a.
Yeah, that's state law. Prop 218 is a state law that was passed several years ago, requires us to do public outreach. It's all about transparency. It's a law we're following is what Prop 218 is. That's and that's what all these references are to. Okay, we're going to move on. Item 5 on our agenda is reports. You know what? We're going to take a break. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Walk down the hallway, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
And we're printing out some copies of the 218 for this right now, so we'll have the studies.
Okay, we're back in session. We're going to move on with item 5A, reports. Report on the July 2023 Operations Department. Damon Wyckoff, take it away.
Thank you, President Ratterman, directors. Well, we have some folks online, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to show you photographs which directly represent all the good work that our folks out in the field do. We do this on a monthly basis. So the first board meeting of every month, we provide an operations department report with a PowerPoint presentation to give you images of some of the work that our field folks do. And so just to remind everybody, we have distribution crews in all of our service areas. Copper Cove, Jenny Lind, Arnold, Ebbets Pass, West Point are the larger ones. And then we have an electrical, a mechanical, a construction, a collections crew. And we have a purchasing agent, and we have a facilities maintenance tech. So we have a lot of things going on. And we try to capture some of the images from all the different departments in the ops report. So we're gonna blaze through here really quick in recognition of time. But this is all highlighting work that was completed in July. Let's see if this thing is. Oh yeah, okay. My apologies, it's going. Oh, let me go back really quick. So this was this first service line replacement repair on Darby Russell was unfortunately, this was a service line that was hit by a PG&E crew working to underground the grid. So some grid hardening work up there, and you can see the failure on the right. It's kind of hard to see, but the service line was just plumb cut in half. And then the image on the right, you can see the repair, 2 couplings with some locating wire wrapped around the new component. So this is what we talk about with a service line, where we might replace like a 2-foot section or a 3-foot section should there be a failure or some sort of emergency. Here's some of our distribution crew members up on Evans Pass working just on general infrastructure improvements. So when we're not fixing leaks, we're also working to ensure the integrity of the distribution system. So you can see the image on the left, cleaning the sanitary apron around the fire hydrant so that we can put a backboard up against the dirt, so we no longer have buried fire hydrants. And then the image on the right, that's a pressure gauge that Matt there on the distribution crew is flushing so that he can pull a fire hydrant pressure, so we can understand what the hydraulics look like statically for the distribution system. So here's in West Point, we have one lift station in West Point, and you can see the image on the left, the gray pump has failed. And so this is going to pump the sewage out of that wet well. So there's a manhole lid there. There's just basically a large tank below that manhole lid that holds septic tank effluent. So really no solids, or not very, very light in solids. And that pump will push this sewage up to the wastewater treatment facility. So the pump failed. The image on the right, the bright blue, is the new pump sitting next to the old pump, waiting for the electricians to come wire it up. Yeah. So that's old. And so this is kind of a rabbit hole that we fall into. And this is really where the talents of our field folks and the purchasing agent lie. Is that pump could have been installed 10, 12, 15 years ago, could be a different type. They might not make the same pump. So then we have to identify what's the horsepower requirement, what are the electrical requirements, what does the piping look like, can we get a new one? And so sometimes, oftentimes actually, the pumps or the components are going to look totally different because they're just a completely new iteration. And so that's kind of representative of that. So this should say fire hydrant replacement on Cane Lane and Rancho. So the image on the left, you can see kind of below the backhoe bucket is the old fire hydrant shoe and 90 just getting moved really by the backhoe in order to install the new one, which is in the foreground. And then oftentimes what you'll see in the image on the right is that we'll paint the guard valve or the isolation valve for the fire hydrant bright blue. Oftentimes they're installed when we replace the fire hydrant. A lot of our fire hydrants throughout many of our service areas don't have isolation valves, which can be a nightmare. Yeah, that was one of them. Okay, there you go. That's a great question, Pat. Do all of the above, I believe. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, and then this one should say PRV failure and repair. And this is another case. So the box in the image on the left full of water, you kind of right in front of that box, you can see a hole, an open hole, and that's just water boiling out of the ground. So a line broke right at a pressure reducing valve on Arrowhead in Copper Cove, and it had no isolation valve. So we could not shut just the pressure reducing valve off to make a repair. We had to do what's called an emergency shutdown, which is take people out of water from one valve section to another valve section so that we could install the valve, which is the blue circle in the image on the right, and make the repair at the pressure reducing valve. So this was an after hours emergency project, I guess you could call it a project, that staff identified late in the day. We get a call, most likely from a customer, hey, there's water here. You know, staff show up on site 3:30 right before quitting time, and got to get a crew out here, get home about 9 o'clock. But that's the great work that our folks do. Here's the installation of a French drain around the courtyard here, right behind the office. This is an example of the construction crew. They do fabulous work. Can't say enough great things about all the work our crews do. Here's increasing the capacity of the stormwater retention pond right out here in front of the administrative building. You can see what it looked like on the left, and then the work that our crews do and how precise the angles are in the larger retention pond in the image on the right. They do a great job.
That size of the new configuration wasn't, as I recall, wasn't shown on the original plan. What caused the increase in size?
So it's basically the run-on from the surrounding area into the retention pond and into our drain inlets on the Courtyard property.
But did somebody from the county say, oops, you gotta increase the size of that, or just observing the water flow?
It's a mathematical increase in size from the county. Yep, that's right. Kind of hard to see in the image on the left, but I think it's important to always talk about the slurry line when we can. This is potholing the slurry line in anticipation potentially of another meter installation. So the image on the left, you can kind of see some yellow below that steel, those T-posts right there in between them. And that is the PVC wrapped aluminum water line for the slurry line that ties into the steel, or is it ductile slurry line itself. So this, I mean, 1971, this was, you know, very high tech piping that was installed and PVC wrapped aluminum. It's really impressive, and its integrity is fabulous still to this day. Great stuff.
The steel slurry line is pretty impressive.
It is very impressive also. Yes. Yep. Yeah.
Swedish steel.
Right. So another, I don't know, we talk about the CAL FIRE crew from Vallecito sometimes, but I don't know if we talk about them enough. They really do a lot of great grunt work for us. And a lot of that work includes cleanup, defensible space cleanup. And although they did not get the entirety of the courtyard / admin building in terms of cleaning up the landscaping, they did a large portion of it. And this is kind of a pictures of our staff with a couple CAL FIRE captains and some wards working to clean up the landscaping. Image on the left is right here behind the admin building. They weed ate the entire property there for us. And the image on the right shows you kind of what we do to facilitate the work for the CAL FIRE crew. So we actually go and pick up all the tools that they're going to use, because they're not allowed to keep the tools on the truck, chainsaws, weed eaters, and the like. And then we deliver them. And then at the end of the day, we pick them all back up and go drop them off. And so Ron Rose, who's one of our senior supervisors on water and wastewater treatment, is the one who works with the CAL FIRE crew directly, does a fabulous job. Here they are out at our spray field at the Vallecito Waste Facility doing some cleanup. And they just can't say enough great things about the CAL FIRE crew. So this one I was definitely one of those kind of a flash panic moment when we hear about the fire in Copperopolis at our Pond 6. And so the image on the left kind of shows you what Pat saw as he was heading to Copper off Pool Station Road, getting onto the highway. And then the image on the right is our reclaim facility. So the storage tank, or the clear well for the reclaimed water that is then pushed over to Saddle Creek for on-site irrigation. And behind that tank, you can see the charred property there, the hillside. So it was a splice on the power pole at the transformer right at the base of our dam. So I wouldn't say, no, it's not our fault. It's a PG&E transformer and a PG&E splice. And so, you know, I'm not sure if there's still an investigation going on. PG&E was there, CAL FIRE was there, and our staff, you know, were the first ones on scene. I mean, they saw the sparks coming off the pole and hitting the grass, and they were doing whatever they could to try to put this fire out. I think our operations staff went through 4 extinguishers just out of the trucks, run into the building, grabbing another one, trying to do anything they could. And obviously it took off. I think it was ultimately around 40 acres, I believe. Yeah. And so you can kind of see images. They used our reclaim facility as their staging area. The image on the left, those are actually the black bags are super sacks of filter media. And you can see the CAL FIRE trucks off in the distance. And this is, the image on the right is looking, if you can imagine, you're basically at the base of our Pond 6 dam, looking over the fence line to the path of the fire, and you can see some of the borade kind of off in the distance there on the other hillside. And then just some more images. We have some above ground piping. The fire rolled over the piping. Piping is operational. It's intact. It runs tertiary treated effluent. So we're not seeing any issues as of right now, but we're going to keep an eye on it, obviously. Yeah. Yeah, pretty tough stuff. You can see that we had the air relief valve box got a little charred, but the air relief valve inside is intact. And so you have a close-up photo and then kind of a far away picture to give you some perspective. And then here is that pump station. So the grassy, the golden grass behind that, that's the actual berm of the Pond 6. That's the Pond 6 dam. And so then the pole, kind of if you were to turn to your left, kind of like the picture shows, you would see that power pole and the road down to the base of the dam. And you can see the charred area underneath the oaks there. And then if you were to just kind of look up from the pole, there's the transformer and there's where the splice was that was shooting sparks into the grass.
And we hear fire in Copperopolis. What are some road names here?
So this would have been off Little John Road. I actually went on to the alert. Yeah. And right.
The treatment plant.
Yeah, right at our facility. And there was a name for the fire, but unfortunately
They call it Teton.
the Teton fire. Yeah.
It's a cul-de-sac that's that.
Teton. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Ralph. I was trying to find the name all day yesterday. Thank God. Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I go by your.
You see that? You see our.
Yeah, I smell it inside, then get over it to sections.
Oh, yeah, man. Hats off to all of the staff in Copper. I mean, we had engineering team members come over here and see whatever they could do. Pat came. I mean, our distribution crew and our operators in Copper just did a fabulous job working to give CAL FIRE anything they could to provide some assistance. So it was quite an eventful afternoon, let me tell you. So diving into crews that save the district money, I think it's unprecedented the amount of work that our electrical crew does. And electricians, as we all know, that field is quite a lucrative field. So to have folks on staff that have the talents that our folks do is just fabulous. So a ChemTrack, a streaming current detector, measures the electrical charge of the raw water, and it adjusts the coagulant dose accordingly, because you want to make water neutral so that you can allow all the debris that's microscopic that's in the raw water to come out of solution and form what we call flock. Cool. So the streaming current detector is a critical component of the treatment process. And we replaced a failed one in Copper Cove, and our electricians just dropped that thing right in. Same with automatic transfer switches. So automatic transfer switches measure the PG&E voltage, and when the power fails, they're the device that determines to the generator, okay, it tells the generator, hey, time to kick on and run. And then when the PG&E power comes back, they tell the generator, okay, you can turn yourself off now. So these fail, over time, and they have to be programmed. They have to be integrated with the generator. And you can see the image on the left is the HMI, or the human machine interface of the transfer switch. And the image on the right shows the electrician's laptop intertied into the generator and the transfer switch, basically making them both communicate together, teaching them how to be friends. And so our folks just do an excellent job this way. And they also unwire, disconnect really large, heavily horsepowered sewer pumps that are covered in, I guess you could call those wipes in the image on the right. So the image on the left shows you the wet well at the most popular lift station in Calaveras County. It's called the Huckleberry Lift Station in La Quintana, Rancho Calaveras. And the image on the right is failed pump number 2. And we need to determine why it failed. So the electricians pulled the pump and disconnected the wiring, and then they conducted a voltage test, and the insulation to the wiring of the pump itself was bad. So that pump goes on a trailer. and it goes to a repair company for repair, and it's in repair right now. So electricians can go from, working with PG&E and CAL FIRE on a fire to installing a Chemtrack streaming current detector to pulling and disconnecting a sewage pump, all in a day's work. And then they can run up to Forest Meadows and install the new electrical panel for the new UV system. This is a great project. So this is a local contractor who's completed the concrete work for the trough for a new set of UV lights, a new bank of lights. Our purchasing agent and the board approved the purchase of a UV system. The purchasing agent secured the equipment, and then our electricians then run the conduit, run all the racing and wiring, and then install the panel and the new UPS. So great work, team project. Everybody's done a great job. And then finally, I just wanted to show everybody a picture of the Wilseyville pressure station, because this is the best picture of it I've ever seen. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen it. It's kind of hidden in the bushes. And this pushes water supply up to Wilseyville, kind of over the Barney Way, over the Middle Fork of the McCullough River, up into the service area around Wilseyville.
But we have such large, nice to show all the stuff that, what staff can do.
Yeah, I mean, we can put together, picture boards, a vision board of the work that we do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I like the picture board idea because we're trying to keep the presentation concise, even though there's a ton of information to share, but that's something like that where you just have it in display.
Right.
Stuff.
Yep.
You have some stuff.
Yeah, a little caption below, this is what this is. This is what this looks like. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, well, thank you, Damon. We're
Thank you,
trying to
guys. Yep, appreciate
a little bit.
I just wanted to make one comment, and that your staff is amazing. It is just, every time you give us this field operations, it just really blows me away. So I'm very pleased to read in our claim summary when you're sending these fellows to school.
Yeah.
Because they have to be,
Yep.
they have to be up to date, and they have to be,
Yep. Yeah, and it's fabulous that they continually want to be educated. And it's a testament to their dedication to CCWD. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Director Thomas has to leave early is why we're pushing the meeting on a little bit. We need to get to closed session. So we're going to get directly to Michael Minkler's report.
I'm going to be, I always say I'm going to try to be quick, and I'm usually not. I think I will be quick today. I do want to,
Are you leaving?
we have a.
Thank you, Francisco. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate your.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.
Okay.
Can I get that time back?
Yes, yeah, you get one more.
It's funny. I love Damon's presentations too. I think I'm going to start taking pictures in meetings of it's probably just me sitting at a table with somebody else, but I need to step up the picture. Very intense. Yeah.
Picture of your laptop.
There you go. Yeah. Because there have been a lot of meetings lately with customers we've reached out to directly, or customers who have reached out to us to talk through the rates. And I really appreciate people that make time to do that. We've had some really good discussions with people along those lines over the last few weeks. We had a good legal affairs meeting last week, where we had a couple of things to celebrate. One was the death of the water rights reform legislation that was potentially harmful. And so it was nice to see that those bills failed. The bigger celebration was well, I shouldn't say celebration yet. Let's keep this in perspective. But Senator Feinstein was successful in moving our request for a budget appropriation for next fiscal year of $11.2 million for the Copper Cove wastewater treatment facility. This is huge. It's unusual. It's for that Section 219 Army Corps program. It's unusual to see that size of a budget appropriation request make it through the Water and Power Committee. The really good news for us is it's not just us that's lobbying to secure that money, but because of the work that our team has done with the Army Corps over the last couple of years, the Army Corps is now also pushing to secure that larger lump sum. We've secured $1 million a year over the last 2 fiscal years, but we've been very clear with them. We can't fund this project on $1 million a year. We have to award a construction contract that's probably going to be closer to $15 million. You can't do that based on $1 million a year trickling in from the federal budget. And so they heard that. They are pushing for the full remainder of our authorization, the federal authorization, $13.2 million. We've received 2, and they're pushing to fund the full 11.2 remaining on that authorization in this next federal fiscal year. That will enable us to award a construction contract for a huge chunk of the work that needs to be done at Copper Cove wastewater. Getting through the Water Power Committee is a huge step. It's not the last step. We have other, there's a legislative process that has to play out here. It helps to have Senator Feinstein pushing it because she's the chair of that subcommittee, and obviously has a lot of influence over the Army Corps budget. So we're optimistic. But we're not counting our chickens yet. We'll see how it plays out over the course of the budget development process. And it could be, hopefully by December, we'll see when the federal government decides to adopt a budget this year. It changes a little bit every year. But hopefully by December, we'll know for sure that was included in the federal budget and that those funds are appropriated for this project.
It's only 4 months, so that's great.
Yeah. It's been a long road to secure that funding, and at the same time, a lot of work currently going into working with the Army Corps Sacramento District Office on implementing the project with the funds that are already available. And it is a red tape quagmire. But our staff are getting, and not only a red tape quagmire, but the rules have changed multiple times on us during this process. So it has been very difficult to navigate this program. But obviously the funds, it's a significant amount of money. It's way too much for us to not pursue. And so we're working through that process with the Army Corps, and we hope to have really good news by the end of this year on the next appropriation. We're also working with MIA on increasing that authorization to fully fund the cost of the project, because as with every project over the last few years, the cost of that project is going up. So multiple lobbying efforts on the federal front, but some really good news pending. I want to point out too, there's Aqua board meeting a couple of weeks ago. I think that it's been a topic of discussion for a while. I've mentioned this before, but the process we're going through here has just brought that affordability issue really clearly into focus for me. Hearing from ratepayers like we heard from today, and like I've been talking to over the last few months who are on fixed income or low income ratepayers. It's heartbreaking the impact that rate increases, in addition to all the other cost increases, has on those folks in particular. And so I've been really pushing the Aqua board to be more vocal on that front. Larry McKinney at Amador has led the way on that as well, because we need them to deliver. Like I said, the state and federal agencies have been talking about an assistance program for low-income ratepayers for a few years now, because this is not a new issue, and we still don't have a really good program to refer people to. And so we're pushing really hard to get Aqua on board with prioritizing that as high as, I think infrastructure funding is already, they're probably the top priority in Aqua. And that does provide assistance indirectly to low-income ratepayers, because the more funding we can bring in from outside sources, the less, it takes pressure off of our rates. But I think on par with that, we should be pushing just as hard for direct assistance for low-income ratepayers. And unless they're going to remove a bunch of the regulatory burdens that cost us a bunch of money, or free up other sources of funding for us, that I think is a piece that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be prioritized. And they need to deliver. They need to get it together. So we're pushing really hard on that front. Most of my time these days is between the rate study, work on the North Fork project, work on New Hogan discussions, and we have in addition to our community workshops next week, we're rolling out our presentation to all of our CCWD staff, and as we've also invited CCWD retirees as they are obviously, all very committed to the district and our communities. And, we want to make sure we share that information widely with those people, because they're, in a lot of cases, people know they worked for CCWD, and they're going to go to them for some answers. And we want to make sure everybody has accurate information. So that's all I have. How about that? That was pretty short.
That was pretty short. You talked quickly for a long time. Okay, we'll start with Cindy.
I just got back.
Welcome back.
Thank you. I agree. I just want to have a couple of really agenda items on the finance thing. If we could talk about the customer assistance program and the finance meeting. And then also, does anybody have any thoughts on us maybe changing at least one of our meetings a month to an evening meeting? To see if we can get people to attend, and try it for a couple of months. If they don't show up, then we go back just to see if we get people to show up. Either both meetings or one or two, the second meeting or whatever. And most of us are retired, except for one. Right. So having a meeting at 5 o'clock or 5:30, could that bring more people down to participate?
I would have to say it's been my experience when I was sitting on the board across town, that it was really odd. People would come in and say, there'd be more people here if you had it in the evening. And so we'd have it in the evenings, and even the people that said there'd be more people here wouldn't show up. So, and it's a terrible burden on staff, and I don't know if I had seen the benefit of that, if it had turned out the way it was supposed to, I'd say, yeah, we ought to do that. But it won't work.
My 2 cents is very similar to it. I do go to other utility in the county that do have their meetings in the evening, and they are not anywhere.
Something that affects our bottom.
If something is going on, people will show up regardless of what time.
Yeah.
What time it is, and I am glad that we are moving that one meeting, our rate study.
Yeah.
But go ahead, Bertha. You're.
Oh, no.
Are you done, Cindy?
Yeah, we would prefer to be up to one. It is a lot convenient for us, but we do.
And you
represent them, so we should.
You want to chime in on that?
Better.
The time of our meeting.
Yeah, and then I was just gonna say, we're talking about it now, it's August, so that if we were to try a trial, we're going into winter. And so that, makes it,
5 o'clock is dark.
yeah.
Okay, Russ, anything to report? Oh, by the way, I forgot to mention, we're board reports, information, and future agenda items. Cindy did bring up some future agenda items for finance committee. Go ahead.
I have a commitment to be out of here very quickly here, but there was a leak that got reported to me in Copperopolis a week ago, and it was kind of an interesting thing that opened my eyes about the wonderful capability and abilities of that Centrex system that's associated with our radio read meters. That there was a leak on on a street in Copperopolis and water was cascading down the hillside across the neighbor below, as she called me. And so anyway, they called the trouble line and a guy was dispatched, the on-call guy went out and he turned the valve off. The water was leaking on the customer side. But getting back to the Centrex thing, it's really a wonderful tool because it produces a bar graph that shows the daily consumption of the water, and compared to last week, it shows a gray bar for last week, and then this blue bar that went up and up and up and up, and turns out that Pat and Damon went out to look at this thing, and did you conclude that the meter actually got overstressed or something by the high volume of water that was going?
Is this what the customer sees on their website, or is this a tool somebody used?
I think the customer will open.
The Citrix is the district facing tool. The customer interface will have that information, and it'll be available.
Because if they looked at it every once in a while, they can.
But you could
regularly,
actually see the hour precisely that our employee went out and turned it off.
Nice.
But I don't know, I was sold on the process that we approved about putting in those things, and I just, it was not clear to me when we approved it that there would be this amount of detail available to us to help explain unexplainable things.
Well, reporting purposes,
Yeah,
you know.
huge.
It's really,
Really good.
yeah.
The other thing I want to report proudly is that I have spent 2 nights in our new house.
Oh, congratulations. About
Fantastic.
time.
Setting records at how long.
It's only taken 25 years.
Anything further?
Nothing
Director
further.
Thomas,
I don't
besides
know.
goodbye?
See ya.
I need to leave, but this closed session, is it something that we could postpone or?
Not entirely.
Okay, well, I apologize, but you have 3 capable people here that can
Oh, yeah.
just
Yep.
take care of it.
All right.
I'll expect a full report. And I
All right.
apologize. I gotta-
No,
Can't even
no
hear
problem.
Bertha or Scott.
I know.
You'll hear Bertha.
Give you,
Um,
call you.
Could you just forward the rest of the meeting to me?
Say,
It'll be available on the website. Yeah,
Bye, Russ. We'll see you later.
Okay, bye, Russ.
Bye-bye.
Okay. My turn?
Director Underhill.
Okay, I don't know if, everyone has heard that our Measure A passed, or we turned it into the county yesterday, and that will be the 1% increase in your sales tax for Calaveras
So
County.
it just means
And
that
it's
it's,
exclusively for fire protection.
but didn't you mean that'll just be on the ballot?
Be on the ballot in March.
So it passed that muster and now
Not
it
enough
needs to go.
signatures.
We got enough
Gotcha, yeah.
signatures.
And they've all been
Perfect.
verified and.
Yeah,
and that-
yeah.
Good job.
We got 2,200, we needed 2,200 and we got 3,000. So it is just, everybody was really
Well, I think
supportive.
it's a good thing.
Yeah, so I was very pleased about that. Okay, pretty quiet. You guys have all the action here at CCWD. That's all I have.
Yeah, I just got one thing to report. Our finance committee meeting is next week, Tuesday, 1 PM here in the building.
Okay, so wait a minute then. So we are having one?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, so I'm not gonna be here. Can you do it?
When is it?
Next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
Well, we were kind of up in
1
the
p.m.
air. We weren't sure if we were gonna have one next week or later.
15th?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll call in, but I won't be unless she,
Right.
I could tell you where I'll be. My mom has some stuff I have to help take care of in Oregon.
Okay,
I can be put on the agenda if you want.
I'll fill in. You want?
Okay, and then I'll just call in.
Okay.
Okay, so listen,
So don't put that,
What
for assistance
1
on that
p.m.
meeting.
finance committee meetings at 1 PM here on August 15th. That's all I have to report. And with that, I'm going to correct a couple things in the agenda. One of them was in it did have the date of September 27th as the public hearing. And it might have said 1 or 5:30. I'm not looking at it right now, but the public hearing is the 13th of September at 5:30 PM here in this building. And here on the next board meetings is Wednesday, August 23rd at 1 PM. And then September 13th, instead of 1 PM, we're doing it at 5:30 PM. That's the second thing just to.
Right.
Are we gonna
clean
be
up.
very much on that agenda? I would imagine not.
No,
And we're gonna go into.
Probably just public
We're
hearing
trying to
might
keep
be
it
it.
just the public hearing.
In the middle of a public meeting, please. We're going into closed session, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, and we'll go into closed.
Thanks,
Thank you,
David, Pat, Ralph.